Grandpa, my parents will take your money after the party today, whispered my 8-year-old granddaughter. So I left early. What I did next shocked everyone. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just looked at the glass of wine my son handed me, smelling the faint scent of bitter almonds, and realized my $45 million empire was about to become my tomb. But they made one mistake. They thought I was a helpless old man in a wheelchair. They forgot that before I was a CEO, I was a Marine. And tonight, I was not going to be the victim. I was going to be the executioner. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. I sat in my wheelchair, a golden throne of lies overlooking the pristine waters of Lake Tahoe. 72 years old today. The guests raised their glasses chanting my name, Conrad King, the logistics tycoon. But all I saw were vultures circling a dying animal. My son Bradley approached with a smile that did not reach his eyes. He held a crystal goblet filled with dark red liquid. To the man who built it all, he announced, his voice booming for the crowd. "Happy birthday, Dad." That was when Mia, my 8-year-old granddaughter, scrambled onto my lap. She was the only pure thing in this house. But she was not smiling. She was trembling. She buried her face in my neck and whispered words that froze the blood in my veins. "Grandpa, please do not drink it. Mommy said, after you go to sleep tonight, they are going to sign the papers to take everything. She said you will not wake up the same." Her tiny voice cracked. "Please, Grandpa." I stiffened. I looked at Bradley. He was sweating, a bead of perspiration rolling down his temple despite the cool evening air. "Drink up, Dad," he urged, pushing the glass closer to my lips. "It is the vintage you love." I brought the glass to my nose. I swirled it, pretending to savor the bouquet. But beneath the notes of oak and berries, there it was. The faint, unmistakable scent of bitter almonds. It was not just wine. It was a chemical leash. A sedative strong enough to turn a lion into a kitten, or perhaps something worse. Cyanide. My heart hammered against my ribs. They did not just want my money. They wanted to incapacitate me, to declare me incompetent, to strip me of the empire I built from a single rusted truck. If I refused the drink, Monica, my daughter-in-law watching from the shadows like a viper, would know the jig was up. If I drank it, I was finished. I knew I had seconds to act. I let my hand tremor, exaggerating the Parkinson symptoms I had been faking for months. The glass tipped. Red wine splashed onto my white shirt and poured into the soil of the potted ficus next to my wheelchair. "Oh, clumsy old fool," I wheezed, breaking into a fit of dry coughing. I brought the napkin to my mouth, pretending to wipe away the wine I never swallowed. Bradley looked down at the stain, a flicker of irritation crossing his face before he masked it with concern. "It is okay, Dad. It is just a shirt." "I am tired, Bradley," I said, letting my voice quaver. "The excitement. My stomach. I think I need to lie down." This was the cue. Monica materialized from the crowd. She was not looking at me with concern. She was looking at the empty glass with triumph. "Of course, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetener. "Dr. Pierce is right here. He can help you to your room. He has something to help you sleep." Dr. Pierce. The family physician who drove a Porsche I knew his salary could not cover. He stepped forward, his hand patting his pocket where I knew a syringe was waiting. "Just a little vitamin cocktail," Conrad Pierce smiled, "to settle the nerves." They wheeled me into my master suite. The moment the heavy oak door clicked shut, I did not wait for Pierce to prepare his needle. "Give me a moment to use the restroom," I grunted. "Do not take too long," Conrad Pierce called out. "The injection works best when you are relaxed." I went into the bathroom and turned on the tap full blast. Then I quietly locked the bathroom door and doubled back into the bedroom. I stood up from the wheelchair. My knees did not buckle. My back did not hunch. I stood at my full height of 6'2". The frailty was a mask, one I had worn to see who would try to stab me in the back. Now I knew. I moved silently to the painting of Catherine, my late wife, hanging above the fireplace. I slid it aside. My fingers punched the code into the wall safe. 1975. The year I bought my first truck. The safe hissed open. I did not take the stacks of cash. I took the snub-nosed 38 Special and the spare key to the 1990 Ford F-150 that I kept under a tarp in the back shed. I checked the chamber. Loaded. Dad, Monica voice came from the hallway, sharp and impatient. She tried the handle. Dad, open the door. Dr. Pierce needs to check your vitals. The doorknob rattled violently. He has locked it, I heard her hiss to Bradley. Break it down. If he does not take that sedative, the lawyer will not accept the signature tomorrow. I moved to the window. It was a 12-foot drop to the flower beds. For a man of 72, it was madness. For a man fighting for his life, it was the only way. I landed in the hydrangeas with a thud that rattled my teeth. Pain shot up my left ankle, but I grit my teeth and scrambled up. The music from the party masked the sound. I stuck to the shadows skirting the perimeter of the manicured lawn. I bypassed the main garage housing the Bentley and the Rolls-Royce. I knew Bradley. He had installed trackers on those cars months ago, claiming it was for my safety. It was for his control. I headed for the gardening shed. I threw the tarp off the Ford F-150. She was rusted around the wheel wells and covered in dust, but she was mechanical, not digital. No GPS, no remote kill switch, just steel and combustion. I slid the key in. I prayed to whatever God watches over foolish old men. I turned it. The engine coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life with a thunderous growl that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet night. The shed doors burst open. I slammed the truck into reverse tires spinning on the gravel. Through the rearview mirror, I saw the back door of the house fly open. Bradley ran out shouting, waving his arms. A security guard, a burly man I did not recognize, stepped into the driveway, raising a hand to stop me. He reached for his belt. I did not touch the brake. I shifted into drive and floored it. The Ford surged forward like a bull seeing red. The guard dove out of the way just as I smashed through the wooden decorative gate, splintering the barrier between my prison and the open road. I hit the highway doing 80, the steering wheel shaking in my hands. My heart was racing, but my mind was crystal clear. For the first time in years, the fog of their gaslighting had lifted. My phone sitting on the passenger seat lit up. It was a text from Monica. Do not be stupid, Conrad. You are sick. Come back before you hurt yourself. I laughed, a harsh barking sound. They still thought they could manipulate me. Then I realized the phone. It was a beacon. As long as I had it, they could find me. I rolled down the window. The night air rushed in cold and biting. I grabbed the $1,000 smartphone and hurled it into the darkness of the interstate. I watched it bounce and shatter in the side mirror. Gone. Now I was a ghost. The silence of the cab gave me space to think. I replayed the last month in my head. Bradley's sweaty palms. The way he kept asking about the passcodes to my diversified accounts. I had overheard him on the phone 2 weeks ago, whispering about leverage and margin calls. He was not just a bad investor. He was a gambler. He had leveraged his inheritance before he even had it, sinking millions into cryptocurrency schemes that had crashed. He was drowning, and he had decided to use my life vest to save himself. And Monica, she did not love him. She loved the lifestyle. If Bradley went under, she went with him. Unless they seized control of the King fortune tonight. It was 2 a.m. when I pulled into the industrial district. The headquarters of Kingston Logistics stood like a fortress of brick and steel. I had retired 5 years ago, handing the reins to a board of directors, but I still owned the building. And I still had the master key. I parked the truck inside the loading bay and made my way to the server room on the 4th floor. The air was stale, smelling of ozone and dust. I sat at the main terminal and typed in a sequence only I knew. 6 months ago, I had noticed small things going missing. A watch, a coin collection. I had installed hidden cameras in the main house disguised as smoke detectors. I had felt paranoid then. Now I felt vindicated. The screens flickered to life. I saw my bedroom in high definition. The door had been kicked in. Bradley was tearing the sheets off my bed, checking under the mattress. Monica was standing by the open window, her face twisted in a mask of pure fury. She was not crying. She was not worried about a missing senior citizen. She was holding the phone to her ear. I turned up the volume on the speakers. "The old bastard is gone," she screamed. He did not finish the whine. "He knows, Bradley. He knows." Bradley looked like he was about to vomit. "What do we do if he goes to the lawyers?" "Shut up." Monica slapped him. The sound rang through the speakers. "Call the police. Tell them your father has dementia. Tell them he has a gun and he is delusional. We need to find him before he changes the will. Get Dr. Pierce to sign the commitment papers now. By tomorrow morning, Conrad King needs to be a ward of the state, or we are both dead." The bitter taste of almonds lingered on my tongue, a chemical warning that screamed danger. I knew I had seconds before Bradley or Monica noticed I had not swallowed. I clamped my jaw shut, forcing a violent spasm in my throat. The cough ripped out of me loud and wet, a performance I had perfected over years of dodging boring board meetings. I grabbed the silk handkerchief from my breast pocket and pressed it to my lips, spitting the toxic red liquid into the fabric while my body convulsed in feigned agony. "Oh, God," I wheezed, letting my head loll back against the wheelchair headrest. My chest. It burns. The music stopped. The chatter died. I felt the weight of 100 eyes on me. This was the part I hated most. The pity. The disgust. I saw it in the faces of my business partners, men I had once crushed in negotiations, now looking at me like a broken antique that needed to be discarded. Dad, Bradley exclaimed, his hand hovering uselessly over my shoulder. He looked terrified, but not for me. He was terrified the plan was failing. "Get him some water." "No." I gasped, pushing his hand away, my voice trembling with the perfect pitch of a senile old man. "I just want to go to my room. Please. Just get me out of here." I slumped in the chair, making myself small, making myself heavy. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Monica. She did not move a muscle. Her face was a mask of cold porcelain, but her eyes were darting between the wine glass and my handkerchief. She suspected. She knew the dose in that glass was enough to drop a horse, and I was still talking. She turned her head slightly and locked eyes with Dr. Pierce, who was standing by the buffet table. She gave a microscopic nod. It was an order. "Finish him." "I will take him," Pierce announced, stepping forward with an oily smile that made my skin crawl. "He is just overstimulated. A little rest is all he needs." He grabbed the handles of my wheelchair, his grip firm, possessive. "Come on, Conrad. Let us get you tucked in." As he wheeled me away from the party, the wheels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor, I felt like a prisoner being escorted to the gallows. We entered the long hallway leading to the master wing. The noise of the party faded, replaced by a silence that felt heavy and suffocating. Monica walked beside us, her heels clicking like gunshots. "You really made a scene back there, Dad," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. "Ruining your own birthday." "Typical." "I am sorry," I mumbled, letting my head drop to my chest. "I feel so weak." "We will fix that," Pierce said softly. Too softly. We reached my bedroom. Pierce pushed me inside and Monica closed the door behind us, locking it with a decisive click. The sound echoed in the large room. Pierce did not waste time. He did not check my pulse. He did not ask how I felt. He walked straight to his medical bag on the dresser and unzipped it. The metallic glint of a syringe caught the light. "This will help you sleep," Conrad Pierce said, tapping the vial. "Deep, restful sleep. You will not dream. You will not worry about anything anymore." "I do not like needles," I whined, gripping the armrests of the wheelchair, my knuckles white. "I just want to sleep naturally." "Stop being a child, Dad," Monica snapped, crossing her arms. "Dr. Pierce knows what is best." "Give him the arm." Pierce approached the needle poised. I saw the liquid inside, clear and lethal. If that needle touched me, it was game over. I would wake up in a facility or I would not wake up at all. I needed to separate them. I needed 3 minutes. My stomach, I groaned, clutching my midsection and doubling over. I think I am going to be sick. The wine. I need the bathroom, now. Pierce hesitated, the needle inches from my arm. "It will pass, Conrad. Just hold still. I am going to vomit on your shoes," I roared, leaning forward and making a retching sound that was only half fake. Monica recoiled, her face twisting in revulsion. "Let him go to the bathroom, you idiot. I do not want vomit on the Persian rug." Pierce sighed, annoyed, but he stepped back. "Fine. But be quick. I am coming in, if you are not out, in 2 minutes." I scrambled out of the wheelchair, using the furniture to support my fake frailty, stumbling toward the ensuite bathroom. I slammed the door behind me and threw the deadbolt. I leaned against the heavy wood, listening to them whisper on the other side. My hands stopped shaking. The act was over. Now the war began. I waited in the bathroom, counting the seconds until I heard the heavy click of the bedroom door latching shut. Monica was complaining loudly about the indignity of waiting on a sick old man, and Pierce was murmuring soothing nonsense about patience. The moment their voices were muffled by the wood, I killed the faucet. The sound of running water died, instantly replaced by the silence of a predator lying in wait. I did not limp to the door. I strode. My spine straightened, the curvature of age vanishing like smoke. I moved with a silent, deadly grace that had kept me alive in jungles 50 years ago. I reached the main bedroom door and threw the heavy brass deadbolt, locking them out. The mechanical click was loud in the quiet room. Immediately, the handle jiggled violently. Dad Monica voice came through the wood, shrill and demanding. "What are you doing? Open this door right now. Dr. Pierce needs to check your blood pressure. You are confused." I did not answer. I walked to the east wall where a life-sized portrait of Catherine hung. My sweet Catherine, who hated violence but understood survival. I swung the heavy frame aside, revealing the cold steel face of a wall safe. My fingers did not tremble as I punched in the code. 7249, the date I enlisted in the Corps. The mechanism whirred and clicked open. Inside lay my true insurance policy. Not a piece of paper, but a matte black M1911 pistol, the one I had carried when the world was burning around me. Beside it sat the spare key to the Ford F-150. I checked the magazine. It was full. I racked the slide, the metallic clack satisfying and final. "Dad, open up," Monica was screaming now, pounding on the wood with her fists. "You are having an episode. Just let us in before you hurt yourself." I ignored her. I walked to the window. They thought I was a senile old man whose bones were brittle as dry twigs. They forgot that I had once climbed cliffs with 80 pounds of gear on my back while taking fire. I unlatched the window and slid it up. The night air rushed in, crisp and clean, smelling of pine and freedom. It was a 12-foot drop to the flower beds below. For Conrad King, the retired CEO, it would have been suicide. For Sergeant King, it was just another obstacle course. I holstered the gun at the small of my back and swung my legs over the sill. My muscles remembered the tension, the readiness. I had spent the last decade building a logistics empire, but I had spent my youth building a warrior. I had kept my body fit, doing push-ups in the early morning darkness, while the rest of the house slept, hiding my strength under baggy cardigans and a feigned shuffle. I needed them to underestimate me, and God did they fall for it. "Break it down, Bradley." I heard Monica shriek from the hallway, her voice twisting into panic. "He has locked us out! Break the damn door down!" The doorframe cracked under a heavy impact. They were coming. I did not look back at the room that had been my gilded cage. I pushed off the sill, dropping into the darkness. I landed in the soft earth of the hydrangeas, rolling instinctively to absorb the impact. I came up in a crouch, dirt on my knees, gun heavy against my spine, alive in a way I had not been for years. The hunt was on. I kept to the shadows, moving through the manicured hedges of the estate, like a ghost haunting his own grounds. The party music was still drifting from the lakeside terrace, a polite jazz melody that masked the chaos erupting in the master bedroom upstairs. I could hear the faint sound of shouting, but I did not look back. My target was the main garage, a structure larger than my first 3 houses combined. Inside, the automatic lights flickered on, revealing the gleaming chrome and polished paint of my collection. The Bentley Continental sat next to the Rolls-Royce Phantom. Beautiful machines. Expensive machines. Traps. I knew my son. Bradley was a coward who loved control. He had insisted on upgrading the security systems on these cars months ago, linking them to his phone. If I turned the key in any of these, he would know instantly. He could kill the engine remotely and lock the doors, trapping me inside until his hired goons came to collect me. I walked past them, my reflection distorted in their waxed surfaces. I headed for the back of the property, to the old maintenance shed that Monica had been begging me to tear down for years. She called it an eyesore. I called it history. I slid the heavy wooden door open on its rusty track. The smell hit me instantly. Old oil, dust, pine. It was the smell of hard work. There she was, my 1990 Ford F-150. The paint was faded, the red peeling to reveal the gray primer beneath, and she was covered in a thick layer of neglect. This was the truck I had driven when Kingston Logistics was just a dream and a single warehouse. She had no computer system, no GPS, no remote locks, just American steel and a V8 engine that ran on stubbornness. I climbed into the cab. The vinyl seat was cracked and cold. I slid the spare key into the ignition. I held my breath and turned it. The starter whined once, twice, a desperate grinding sound in the quiet shed. "Come on, old girl," I whispered. "Do not fail me now." On the third turn, she caught. The engine roared to life with a thunderous, unrefined bellow that shook the tools hanging on the walls. It was loud, obnoxiously loud. It was the sound of a declaration of war. I slammed the gear shift into reverse and backed out, tires crunching violently on the gravel. I spun the wheel and shifted into drive. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the long driveway leading to the main gate. That was when I saw him. A man stepped out from the security booth, blocking the exit. It was not old Sam, the night watchman I had known for years. It was a new guy, a muscle-bound giant in a tactical vest, one of the private security contractors Bradley had brought in last week. He held up a hand, palm out, commanding me to stop. His other hand went to his belt, resting on a taser. He was shouting something, but the roar of the engine drowned him out. He thought I would stop. He looked at the old truck and the old man behind the wheel, and he saw weakness. He saw a confused senior citizen who would be intimidated by a uniform and a stern look. He did not see the man who had driven convoys through hostile territory. I did not touch the brake. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and floored the accelerator. The truck surged forward, the rear tires spinning and catching, finding traction. The guard eyes went wide. He realized too late that I was not bluffing. He dove to the left, rolling into the decorative bushes just as the massive steel bumper of the Ford made contact with the barrier arm. There was a sickening crunch of metal and wood. The barrier shattered, sending splinters flying into the night air. The truck shuddered, but kept moving, plowing through the debris without slowing down. I checked the rearview mirror. I saw the guard scrambling for his radio, shouting into it. Let him call. By the time they organized a pursuit, I would be a ghost on the highway. I turned onto the main road, leaving the golden cage of my estate behind, disappearing into the darkness of a world I was about to set on fire. The interstate was a blur of asphalt and passing headlights under the orange glow of the street lamps. I pushed the old Ford to 80 miles an hour, the engine screaming a protest against its years of neglect. My hands were cramping around the steering wheel, not from age, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. On the passenger seat, my phone lit up again. It vibrated against the vinyl upholstery like an angry hornet. Bradley, then Monica, then Bradley again. They were relentless. I glanced at the screen. The name popping up was my son, but the face I saw in my mind was a stranger. I remembered the conversation I had overheard just last week, standing outside his home office door. I had gone to ask him about a game of chess, but stopped when I heard him sobbing. He was not crying over a lost parent or a sick child. He was crying over a ledger. "I lost it all, Monica," he had whispered, his voice cracking with terror. "The crypto market tanked. The leverage killed us. I owe $5 million. If I do not pay by the end of the month, they are going to break my legs." $5 million. He had gambled away a fortune that took me a decade to build in a digital casino I did not even understand. That was why he needed the estate. Not for legacy, not for stewardship. He needed to plug a hole in a sinking ship. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Monica. "Dad, please answer. We are worried about your heart." My heart. The audacity made me laugh, a dry, humorless sound. I remembered the papers she had slid across the breakfast table 3 days ago. "Just standard procedure, Dad," she had said, smiling that shark smile. "It is a power of attorney, in case you get tired of managing the accounts. We can handle the heavy lifting." I had refused then, seeing the flash of fury in her eyes before she masked it. She did not want to help me carry the load. She wanted to bury me under it. They were tracking me. I knew it. Modern phones were nothing but digital leashes, and as long as that device was in the cab, they knew exactly where I was. I was leading them right to me. I rolled down the window. The wind roared into the cabin, loud and violent, whipping my thinning hair. The noise of the rushing air drowned out the engine, drowned out the ringing phone, drowned out the memory of Mia whispering in my ear. I grabbed the device. It felt heavy, warm with the battery life that connected me to the people trying to kill me. I did not hesitate. I hurled it out into the black void of the night. I watched in the side mirror as it tumbled along the asphalt, sparking once before shattering into oblivion. The connection was severed. The silence that filled the cab instantly was heavy, but it was mine. I was off the grid. No GPS, no calls, no lies. Just a man and his truck driving north toward the rain-soaked streets of Seattle. They thought they were chasing a senile old man. They were about to find out they were chasing a ghost who knew their secrets better than they did. The industrial park was a ghost town at 2 a.m. I killed the headlights as I rolled the Ford into the rear lot of Kingston Logistics. The building loomed against the night sky, a silent monument to 40 years of grit. I built this place from the ground up, brick by brick, and even though I had retired 5 years ago, it still felt more like home than that mausoleum by the lake ever did. I bypassed the main entrance. I went straight for the service door near the loading docks. My hand felt for the heavy brass master key on my ring. It slid into the lock with a smooth, familiar action. The door groaned open, and the smell hit me. Diesel fumes, stale coffee, and floor wax. The scent of an empire. I did not stop to reminisce. I took the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring the protest in my knees. I needed the server room on the 4th floor. It was the nerve center of the company, but it also housed a private server I had installed 6 months ago off the books, a server that linked directly to the hidden eyes I had placed inside my own home. The room was freezing, the hum of the cooling fans a steady drone. I sat at the terminal and typed in the encryption key. The wall of monitors flickered to life. My heart went cold. I was looking at my bedroom, the one I had escaped from less than an hour ago. On the screen, the heavy oak door I had locked finally gave way. It flew open, splintering at the jamb. Bradley stumbled into the room, a crowbar in his hand, his face slick with sweat. He rushed to the bed, ripping back the duvet, expecting to find a drugged old man. He found nothing but empty sheets. "Where is he?" Bradley shouted, spinning around. He checked the bathroom. Empty. He checked the closet. Empty. Monica marched in behind him. She did not look frantic, she looked lethal. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on the open window and the displaced portrait of Catherine. She saw the open wall safe. "He is gone," Bradley stammered, dropping the crowbar. "The safe is open." He took the gun. The sound of the slap was tinny through the computer speakers, but the force of it snapped Bradley head to the side. "You idiot," Monica hissed, her face contorted into a snarl I had never seen before. "He did not drink the wine. I told you he was faking. The old bastard knows everything." "What do we do?" Bradley whined, holding his cheek. "If he goes to the lawyers, we are finished. He will cut us off. The loan sharks will kill me." "Shut up," Monica grabbed him by the lapels of his tuxedo, shaking him violently. "Listen to me. We are controlling this narrative right now. Get your phone. Call the police." "The police?" Bradley blinked, confused. "Yes, you spineless fool, call 911. Tell them your father has suffered a severe psychotic break. Tell them he has dementia and he is armed and dangerous. Tell them he threatened to kill himself and us. But that is not true." "It does not matter if it is true," Monica screamed, pushing him toward the phone. "If the police find him first and think he is crazy, anything he says about us will sound like the ravings of a lunatic. We need him in custody or in a straitjacket before the banks open tomorrow. Make the call, Bradley. Make the call, or I swear I will leave you to the Russians myself." I watched as my son, my flesh and blood, nodded slowly. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, composed his face into a mask of worried grief, and dialed 3 numbers. I sat back in the dark server room, the blue light of the monitor washing over my face. They were not just thieves. They were monsters. They were going to use the law to hunt me down like a rabid dog. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled picture of Mia I kept in my wallet. "Hold on, kiddo," I whispered to the empty room. "Grandpa is not crazy, but he is about to get very dangerous." The sun was just bleeding over the gray skyline of Seattle when I pulled the truck into a rundown gas station off 4th Avenue. My stomach was growling a hollow ache that reminded me I had not eaten since the party. Since the poison. I pulled my cap down low over my eyes and stepped out into the drizzle. I looked like just another washed-up old-timer down on his luck, which I suppose was exactly what I was. I walked to the ATM in the corner of the convenience store. The fluorescent lights hummed with an irritating buzz. I did not want to use my credit cards. Those left a digital trail, a breadcrumb trail, straight to my location. But a cash withdrawal from a debit account at a third-party ATM was safer. I needed supplies, food, burner phones. I slid my platinum debit card into the slot. It was the heavy metal kind, the one that usually commanded respect from bank tellers. I punched in my PIN, 1975. I selected withdrawal, $500. The machine whirred. It made the familiar clunking sound of counting bills. I weighted my hand hovering over the dispenser slot. But the money did not come out. Instead, the screen flashed red. A message popped up that made my breath hitch in my throat. Transaction denied. Card retained. Reason code 409. Account frozen. Guardianship dispute. I stared at the screen. Code 409. I knew that code. I had seen it used on employees who had lost their minds or had their assets seized by the courts. "Please contact your legal guardian for access to funds," the screen mocked me before going black. My legal guardian. Monica. She had done it. She had not waited for the morning. She must have called the bank emergency fraud line in the middle of the night, armed with whatever forged medical documents Dr. Pierce had signed. She had triggered the emergency protocol for incapacitated seniors. They had flagged me as a vulnerable adult, likely suffering from dementia, who was being financially exploited. The irony was bitter enough to choke on. They were the exploiters, yet the system was designed to let them lock me out of my own life with a single phone call. I hit the cancel button. I hit it again, pounding the plastic keys with my fist. Give me back my card. But the machine was a steel vault. It had swallowed my access to $45 million. Hey, buddy, do not break the machine, the clerk behind the counter shouted, looking up from his phone. You got no money, move along. I turned away, my face burning with a shame I had not felt since I was 20 years old, and broke. I walked out to the truck and pulled out my wallet. Leather, Italian, empty. I opened the billfold. 2 crisp $100 bills. That was it. That was my war chest. Yesterday I could have bought this entire city block. Today I had $200 to fight a war against a son who had the law on his side and a daughter-in-law who had the devil on hers. I bought a stale coffee and a protein bar with a $5 bill I found in the glove box. I sat in the cab eating the dry food, watching the rain streak the windshield. They thought this would break me. They thought cutting off the money would force me to crawl back home begging for forgiveness and a warm bed. They forgot where I came from. I started Kingston Logistics with a loan from a shark and a truck that smelled like wet dog. I knew how to be poor. I knew how to be hungry. And I knew that a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous man on earth. I knew I could not go to Henderson and Associates. They had been my legal counsel for 20 years, which meant they were the first people Monica would have called. She probably had old man Henderson convinced I was wandering the streets in a fugue state by now. If I walked into their lobby, they would not offer me legal advice. They would offer me a cup of tea and call my son to come collect me. I needed a shark. I needed someone who was not on the payroll. I needed someone who hated me enough to know exactly how dangerous I could be. I drove straight to the glass monolith downtown that housed the offices of Whitman and Sterling. 10 years ago, Marcus Whitman had sued Kingston Logistics over a breach of contract regarding a union dispute. He was vicious, brilliant, and completely amoral. He had cost me $2 million and an ulcer. He was perfect. I left the rusted Ford in a loading zone, risking a ticket I could not pay, and marched into the lobby. I caught my reflection in the elevator doors. I looked like a deranged hobo. My tuxedo shirt was stained with wine and dirt from the flower bed. My trousers were torn at the knee. I had not shaved and my eyes were rimmed with red. The elevator opened on the 42nd floor. The reception area was all white marble and intimidation. The receptionist, a young man with a haircut that cost more than my car, looked up from his computer. His nose wrinkled slightly, as if he smelled the diesel fumes clinging to my jacket. "Deliveries are in the basement," he said, without making eye contact. "I am here to see Marcus Whitman," I said, my voice gravelly. He let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Mr. Whitman is in a partners meeting, and he certainly does not take walk-ins from the street. Please leave, sir, or I will call building security." I did not have time for bureaucracy. I heard the low murmur of voices coming from the double mahogany doors at the end of the hall. I started walking. "Sir," the receptionist shouted, scrambling out of his chair. "Sir, you cannot go back there. Go." I ignored him. I pushed through the heavy doors and stepped into the conference room. The conversation died instantly. 12 lawyers in Italian suits turned to stare at me. At the head of the long table sat Marcus Whitman. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes were still predatory. He frowned, looking at the dirty, disheveled intruder standing on his Persian rug. Security Whitman barked, not even rising from his chair. "Get this bum out of here." "Hello, Marcus," I said, my voice filling the room. "You look good." He paused, his eyes narrowing. He squinted, peering through the distance. "Conrad King?" he asked, his voice dripping with disbelief. Is that you? You look like hell. I feel like it too, I replied, walking past the stunned associates. I stopped at the head of the table. I could see the curiosity warring with disgust in his eyes. I heard you retired, Whitman sneered. I did not know you retired to a dumpster. I unclasped the Patek Philippe from my wrist. It was a Grandmaster chime, a limited edition piece I had bought myself the day I sold the majority shares. It was heavy gold and worth more than most people made in a decade. I slammed it down onto the polished wood table. The heavy thud echoed like a gunshot, silencing the room. This is worth $50,000 on a bad day, I said, leaning over the table until I was inches from his face. I am not crazy. I am not senile. But right now I have zero access to my funds and my family is trying to commit me. That watch buys me 1 hour of your time. Just 1 hour. Are you in or are you out? Whitman picked up the watch, holding it up to the light. He watched the tourbillon spin, a mechanical heartbeat of pure gold. He did not look at me. He looked at the 12 lawyers sitting in stunned silence around the table. Get out, he said, his voice low and dangerous. The room cleared in seconds, leaving only the two of us and the hum of the air conditioning. He tossed the watch back across the table. It slid across the mahogany and stopped right at my fingertips. Keep it, Conrad Whitman said, sitting down and opening his laptop. I do not need your money. I am already rich, but I have a pathological hatred for being played. And if your son is trying to weaponize the legal system I helped build, I am going to bury him under it. Sit down. We went to work. Whitman did not ask for coffee. He did not ask for pleasantries. He logged straight into the state corporate database, his fingers flying across the keyboard. I told him everything. The almond scent in the wine, the locked door, the frozen ATM. He listened without blinking, absorbing the data like a machine. If they froze your personal accounts, they must have filed an emergency ex parte motion, he explained, his eyes scanning a digital docket. There it is. Filed at 3:15 a.m. Petitioner Bradley King. Reason immediate danger to self and assets due to advanced dementia. He snorted. They wasted no time. But that was just the opening salvo. Whitman switched tabs, accessing the shareholder registry for Kingston Logistics. My company. The empire I had built from a single used truck into a $45 million logistics titan. It was not just a business. It was my life. It was the legacy I intended to leave for Mia. Here, Whitman said, pointing a manicured finger at the screen. Look at this. It was a document uploaded 48 hours ago. A secured loan agreement. $5 million in liquid cash leveraged against 20% of my voting shares. The interest rate was predatory, the kind of loan you take when you are desperate and stupid. I leaned in closer. At the bottom of the page was my signature. Conrad J. King. The loops were sweeping, the pressure consistent. It looked perfect. Too perfect. I did not sign this, I whispered, the rage vibrating in my chest. I was at the lake house. I have not signed a business document in 6 months. Whitman zoomed in. Look at the witness line. Monica King. And the notary stamp belonged to a man named Henderson. My family lawyer for 20 years, the man I played golf with, the man who held my will. She forged it. Whitman said, his voice cold. She practiced your signature until she got it right, and then she got your crooked lawyer to stamp it. They are not waiting for you to be committed, Conrad. They are already stripping the copper out of the walls. I stared at the screen. Bradley was not trying to take over the company to run it. He was trying to liquidate it. He was going to sell off the fleet, sell the warehouses, and fire the 300 employees who depended on me just to cover his gambling debts. He was going to burn down my legacy to keep himself warm. They think they have won, I said, my hands clenching into fists. They think I am a confused old man wandering the streets. Whitman closed the laptop with a snap. They made a mistake, he said, a cruel smile touching his lips. They left you alive. I know a guy, an investigator. If they want to play dirty, we need to get in the mud. Let us see what else your son is hiding. The door to the conference room opened an hour later. A man walked in who looked like he had been carved out of granite and left out in the rain. This was Russo. He did not wear an Italian suit. He wore a leather jacket that had seen better decades and smelled faintly of menthol cigarettes and rain. He did not offer a hand to shake. He just tossed a thick manila envelope onto the polished mahogany table. It landed with a heavy slap that sounded like a verdict. You better sit down for this, Mr. King Russo said, his voice a low rumble like a diesel engine idling. Your boy is not just bad at math. He is suicidal. Whitman opened the envelope. He slid a series of glossy 8x10 photographs across the table toward me. I looked down and felt my stomach drop. They were surveillance shots taken with a long-range lens, grainy and dark, but clear enough. There was Bradley standing in the alley behind a strip club in the bad part of town. He looked small, terrified. Facing him were two men who looked like they strangled bears for exercise. They were not wearing suits. They were wearing tracksuits and gold chains thick enough to tow a truck. I know these guys, Russo said, pointing a calloused finger at the photo. That is Sergei and Ivan. They are collection agents for the Petrov organization. Russian mafia. They do not do credit checks, Conrad. They do broken femurs. I stared at my son's face in the photo. He was pleading, his hands clasped together. I had seen that look before when he was 6 years old and broke a vase, but this time there was no forgiveness in the eyes staring back at him. He owes $5 million, Whitman asked, looking at a ledger Russo had included. That was the principal, Russo corrected. With the juice, it is closer to 7 now. He borrowed to cover his crypto losses, thinking he could double down and win it back. Classic gambler fallacy. But he lost that too. Now the clock is ticking. How long, I asked, my voice sounding hollow in the large room. Friday, Russo said. 3 days. If he does not pay by midnight on Friday, they are not going to foreclose on his house. They are going to put him in a barrel and dump him in the Sound. I leaned back in the expensive leather chair, closing my eyes. The puzzle pieces slammed into place with the force of a physical blow. The cyanide in the wine. The forged documents. The desperate rush to get me committed. It was not just greed. It was terror. Bradley was not trying to steal my empire just to buy a new yacht. He was trying to liquidate my life work to save his own skin. He was going to sell off the trucks, the warehouses, the pensions of 300 loyal families just to pay off a gambling debt to a bunch of thugs. He is a dead man walking, Whitman said coldly, flipping through the rest of the file. That explains the desperation. He needs liquid cash, and he needs it yesterday. If he cannot sell the company, he dies. I looked at the photo again. My son. A weak, foolish man who had made a deal with the devil. He was willing to kill his own father to clean up his mess. A part of me wanted to let the Russians have him. He had earned it. But then I remembered Mia. If Bradley went down, the Russians would not stop at him. They would go after the wife. They would go after the daughter. They would burn everything down until they got their pound of flesh. He needs money, I said, opening my eyes. He thinks I am the only way out. He is wrong, Whitman said, closing the file. You are not the way out, Conrad. You are the only thing standing between him and a concrete pair of shoes. But we can use this. Desperate men make mistakes. And your son is the most desperate man in Seattle right now. Russo reached into his jacket again and pulled out a second folder slimmer than the first, but somehow heavier with implication. He slid it across the mahogany table until it rested next to the evidence of my son's stupidity. If you thought Bradley was the villain here, Mr. King, you are mistaken, Russo rumbled. Bradley is just the useful idiot. Here is the architect. I opened the file. The first photo hit me harder than the sight of the Russian mobsters. It was a high-resolution shot taken through the window of a downtown coffee shop. Monica. My daughter-in-law was sitting across from a man. She was laughing, her hand resting intimately on his forearm. The man was not my son. It was Dr. Pierce, the family physician, the man who had tried to inject me with a vitamin cocktail less than 12 hours ago. They are not just friends, Russo said, his voice devoid of emotion. They have been sleeping together for 8 months. Pierce isn't just signing the commitment papers as a favor. He is doing it for a cut. I flipped through the rest of the photos. Monica kissing Pierce in his Porsche, the two of them arguing over blueprints for a villa in Tuscany. It was sickening. The betrayal was total. But it was the timeline that Russo laid out next that truly revealed the depth of their depravity. We tapped Monica's cloud backups, Russo explained. We found emails, drafts of divorce papers. She isn't planning to stay with Bradley after the payout. I listened as the detective outlined the endgame. It was surgical in its cruelty. Step 1, commit Conrad King to a mental institution seizing power of attorney. Step 2, liquidate Kingston Logistics to pay off the Russian debt, ensuring they do not get killed by the mob. Step 3, file for divorce, immediately citing Bradley's gambling addiction and financial recklessness. Step 4. Monica takes half of the remaining assets plus full custody of the child and vanishes to Italy with Dr. Pierce. My son was going to lose his father, his company, his wife, and his dignity. He would be left with nothing but the shame of what he had done, and the worst part was I could not find it in my heart to pity him. He had raised a hand against me. He had chosen his path. But then I saw the last photo in the stack. It was Mia sitting alone on a park bench while Monica argued on the phone in the background. The little girl looked so small, so incredibly lonely. My heart broke not for the son who betrayed me, but for the granddaughter who was about to be abandoned. Monica did not want custody because she loved Mia. She wanted custody because Mia came with a trust fund. The child was just another asset to be liquidated, another line item on a spreadsheet. I looked up at Whitman, my eyes burning. Bradley is a fool, and he deserves whatever is coming to him. But Monica, she is something else entirely. She is a viper. She is planning to take the girl. Whitman noted, his voice soft. If she leaves the country with your granddaughter, you will never see her again. Over my dead body, I growled, standing up and pacing the length of the conference room. I did not care about the money anymore. I did not care about the company. I cared about that little girl who whispered in my ear and saved my life. I was going to burn their entire world to the ground to keep her safe. Russo gathered the photos. So, what is the play? The play is simple, I said, staring out the window at the city I had helped build. We are going to give them exactly what they want. They want a senile old man who signs over his life. I will give them the performance of a lifetime. And when they think they have won, I am going to remind them why you never corner a wounded animal. I thought I had reached the limit of my rage. I thought seeing my son indebted to the mob and my daughter-in-law plotting with her lover was the peak of this nightmare. I was wrong. Russo hesitated, his hand hovering over his tablet. There is one more thing, Mr. King. You need to see why you cannot just walk away, why you cannot just let the Russians handle your son. He tapped the screen and turned the device toward me. The video was grainy low-light footage from one of the hidden cameras I had installed in the hallway outside Mia's bedroom. It was time-stamped last night. While I was driving through the rain, sleeping in a truck, my 8-year-old granddaughter was locked in her room. The room was dark, save for the glow of a nightlight. Mia was sitting on the floor, her back against the door. She was not playing with the mountain of expensive toys I had bought her. She was holding a styrofoam cup of instant noodles, cold, cheap, processed sludge. She was eating it with a plastic fork, tears streaming down her face. Where are her parents? I asked, my voice trembling with a fury that made it hard to breathe. Russo swiped to the next image. It was a receipt time-stamped at the exact same time. The French Laundry. A $500 tasting menu. Truffles. Caviar. Champagne. They locked her in, I whispered, staring at the little girl on the screen. They told the nanny not to come. Russo explained, his voice hard as granite. Said they wanted a private family night. Then they locked the girl in her room, turned off the lights, and went out to celebrate your demise. They left an 8-year-old child alone in a mansion for 6 hours with a cup of noodles. On the screen, Mia pulled her knees to her chest. She looked at the camera lens as if she knew I was watching. Grandpa, she sobbed, her voice tiny and broken through the speakers. Grandpa, please come back. I am scared. Daddy is screaming again. Mommy says you are gone. Please, Grandpa. Something inside me snapped. It was not a figure of speech. I felt a physical break, a fracture in the dam, holding back 40 years of discipline. I did not see my business partners. I did not see the lawyer. I saw red. I brought my fist down on the conference table with the force of a pile driver. The heavy crystal water glass sitting near my hand did not just tip over, it exploded. Shards of glass flew across the mahogany like shrapnel. Water soaked into the expensive wood. Blood, dark and thick, welled up on my knuckles where the glass had sliced the skin, but I did not feel the pain. I did not feel anything but a cold, singular purpose. Whitman flinched, leaning back in his chair. Russo did not move, he just watched me with a grim nod, acknowledging the shift in the room's atmosphere. Enough, I growled, my voice dropping to a register that made the air in the room feel heavy. No more observation. No more gathering evidence. They crossed the line. They did not just come for my money. They tortured a child. They came for my blood. I looked at Whitman, my eyes burning with the intensity that made him look away. Activate Plan B. Whitman adjusted his glasses, looking at the blood dripping from my hand onto his table. Plan B is the nuclear option, Conrad. If we do this, there is no coming back. You will destroy them completely. They will face prison, ruin. I do not care about them, I roared, standing up and ignoring the blood running down my hand. I want them destroyed. I want them to lose every dime, every friend, every shred of dignity. But first, we secure the girl. Mia must be safe. Nothing else matters. Get the paperwork ready, Marcus. Tonight, the king returns, and he is bringing hell with him. Russo handed me a prepaid burner phone bought with cash from a bodega 3 blocks away. It felt cheap and flimsy in my hand, a stark contrast to the heavy gold watch I had slammed onto the table earlier. I took a deep breath, closing my eyes for a second. I needed to summon the actor within the man who had bluffed his way through union strikes and hostile takeovers. I needed to become the victim. I dialed Bradley's number. My hand was steady as a rock, but I forced my breathing to become shallow and rapid. I let a tremor creep into my throat. Bradley. I whispered into the receiver the moment the line connected. Bradley, are you there? Dad. His voice exploded through the tiny speaker, a mix of panic and exhaustion. Where the hell are you? We have the police looking everywhere. Why did you run? I do not know, son, I whimpered, letting my voice crack perfectly. I am in a room. It is dark. It smells like old cigarettes. I think I drove here, but I do not remember driving. My head, Bradley. It is spinning. Everything is fuzzy. Did I fall asleep at the party? I heard the muffled sound of a hand covering the microphone on his end, but he did not cover it well enough. I heard the sharp intake of breath from Monica. It is the residue, she hissed, her voice faint but distinct. I told you he must have swallowed some of the wine before he spilled it. The sedative is kicking in. He is in a fugue state. He does not remember escaping. Ask him where he is. I smiled, a cold, humorless expression that would have terrified my son if he could see it. They were so arrogant. They wanted to believe their plan had worked so badly that they were ignoring the logic. Dad Bradley said, coming back on the line, his tone shifting from angry to sickly sweet. "It is okay. You just had a bad reaction to some medication. Tell me where you are. We will come get you. We will bring you home." "I am scared, Bradley," I said, injecting a note of pathetic, childish fear into my voice. "I am at a place called the Starlight Motel, on Route 9, south of the city. I do not have any money. Please hurry." The Starlight Motel was a flea-ridden dump 40 miles in the opposite direction from where we were sitting. It was the perfect decoy. "Stay right there," Dad Bradley commanded. "Do not go outside. Do not talk to anyone. We are leaving now. We will be there in an hour. Just sit tight." "I promise, son. Just please hurry." I pressed the end call button. The mask of the terrified old man vanished instantly. I set the phone down on the mahogany table and looked at Whitman and Russo. My eyes were dry, my spine was straight, and my resolve was harder than steel. "They bought it," I said, standing up and buttoning my torn tuxedo jacket. "They think I am a confused vegetable waiting to be harvested. They are heading south, which gives us exactly 2 hours before they realize the room is empty." Whitman stood up, grabbing his briefcase. 2 hours is enough. The bank is expecting us." Russo cracked his knuckles, a sound like gunshots in the quiet room. "And while you are moving the money, I will make sure the welcoming committee for your son is ready." "Let us go," I said, walking toward the door. "My son thinks he is driving to pick up a senile old man. He has no idea he is driving straight off a cliff." While my son and his treacherous wife were speeding south, doing 90 miles an hour toward a fleabag motel, chasing a phantom. I was sitting in the back of Whitman's armored Maybach, gliding silently into the heart of the financial district. The rain was coming down hard now, washing the grime from the truck off the city streets, but it could not wash the grime off my soul. I felt dirty. Not from the physical filth of my escape, but from the biological filth of sharing DNA with a man like Bradley. We pulled up to the Geneva Private Bank. This was not a place with ATMs or tellers. This was a place where money went to be quiet. It was a fortress of limestone and bulletproof glass designed to protect fortunes from exactly the kind of predators my family had become. I stepped out of the car. My tuxedo was torn, my shoes were muddy, and I smelled like diesel and sweat. The doorman, a man in a pristine uniform, hesitated, his hand hovering near his earpiece, to call security. Whitman stepped out behind me, his suit sharp enough to cut glass. "He is with me," Whitman said, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 billable hours. "Open the door." The doorman blanched and held the door open. We marched across the lobby. The silence inside was absolute. It was the silence of wealth. Mr. Weiss, the senior account manager, met us at the entrance to the private vaults. He was a man who had managed my accounts for 30 years, a man who knew where every skeleton was buried because he had paid for the shovels. Conrad Weiss said, his eyes widening as he took in my appearance. "My God. We heard rumors. There was a police report. They said you were missing. They said you were unwell." "I am not unwell, Weiss," I said, my voice echoing off the marble. "I am clarifying my estate. We need a conference room, now." 5 minutes later, we were seated in a room that smelled of old leather and money. Whitman laid the documents on the table. They were complex financial instruments drafted in the last hour, but the intent was simple. Scorched earth. "I want to initiate a full transfer," I said, looking Weiss in the eye. "The Cayman holdings. The Singapore accounts, the liquid capital from the recent merger. Everything." Weiss looked at the papers and his face went pale. "Conrad, this is 90% of your liquid net worth. $45 million. If you move this into an irrevocable trust, you lose control. You cannot get it back. You are effectively making yourself a pauper on paper." I know what I am doing, I said. Move it. All of it. Put it into the Mia King Trust. The stipulations are clear. No access until she is 25. The trustee is a blind third-party firm in Zurich. Not me. Not Bradley. Nobody touches a dime. But why? Weiss asked, his hands trembling as he reached for his tablet. Because my son is coming for a feast, I said, picking up the heavy fountain pen. And I want him to find an empty table. I signed the documents. The scratch of the nib on the paper was loud in the quiet room. With each stroke of the pen, I was severing the lifeline my son was desperate for. I was not just protecting Mia. I was setting the trap. When Bradley and Monica finally cornered me, when they finally forced me to sign their power of attorney, they would be seizing control of a ghost ship. They would inherit nothing but my name and the massive tax liability I was about to unleash. I finished the signature and capped the pen. It was done. I was no longer a billionaire. I was just a grandfather with a burning need for justice. Authorize the transfer, I ordered. And Weiss, one more thing. Print a receipt. A single receipt showing a zero balance. I want to have something to hand to my son when he asks where his inheritance went. I drove the battered Ford back toward the estate, the morning sun casting long shadows across the road. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was racing, rehearsing the performance of a lifetime. I had to become the very thing they wanted me to become. Weak, confused, a relic. I pulled up to the main gate, the one I had smashed through only hours before. The debris had been cleared, but the scars on the wood remained. I saw their SUV idling in the driveway. They had just returned from their wild goose chase to the motel, furious and exhausted. This was it. I opened the door of the truck and stepped out onto the gravel. I took a deep breath, let my knees buckle, and collapsed. I hit the ground hard. The stones bit into my palms and knees, but I did not flinch. I lay there in the dirt, letting my breathing become shallow and ragged. I heard the car doors slam. Footsteps crunched rapidly toward me. Dad. It was Bradley. His voice was thick with panic. He grabbed my shoulders, hauling me up with a roughness that betrayed his anger. Where the hell have you been? We drove all night. We went to the motel. You were not there. I let my head loll back. I blinked, my eyes unfocused, staring past him at the towering oak trees. I let my mouth hang open slightly, a look of utter vacuity on my face. I looked at my son, the man who had tried to sell me out to the mob, and I did not see him. I looked through him. Ernest, I whispered, my voice trembling and weak. Ernest, is that you? We need to load the truck. The shipment is late. Bradley froze. He shook me slightly. Dad, what are you talking about? It is me. Bradley. No, I mumbled, reaching out a shaking hand to pat his cheek. Ernest. You look so young. Did we get the loan? The bank said no, but we can fix it. Monica appeared beside him. She looked disheveled, her expensive coat wrinkled, but her eyes were sharp as flint. She grabbed my chin, turning my face to look at her. She studied my dilated pupils, my slack jaw. She did not see a person. She saw an opportunity. She looked at Bradley, and a slow, cruel smile spread across her face. She winked. It is kicking in, she whispered, the triumph dripping from her words. The residue from the wine. It took a few hours, but the chemical cocktail is finally frying his circuits. He is totally lucid dreaming. Bradley exhaled a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. Are you sure? Listen to him, Bradley, Monica hissed. He thinks you are his dead father. He thinks he is back in the 70s. He is completely gone. This is better than we planned. We do not have to fake the dementia. He is delivering it to us on a silver platter. I let out a low moan, sagging against Bradley. I am tired, Ernest. I just want to go home. We are home, Dad. Bradley said, his voice taking on that sickly sweet tone again. "Come on, let us get you inside." They dragged me up the steps, my feet scuffing against the marble. I leaned heavily on my son, playing the part of the invalid. Inside, the house smelled of stale party food and treachery. "Get him to the library," Monica ordered, marching ahead. "I am calling Dr. Pierce and the notary. We are doing this now, while he is pliable, before he snaps out of it." I let them lead me to the slaughter. They thought I was a confused old man lost in the memories of the past. They had no idea that I was wide awake and I had just locked the doors to the trap they had walked into. Dr. Pierce breezed into the library like he owned the place, carrying a medical bag that looked more like a prop than a tool of healing. He smelled of expensive cologne and betrayal. Monica was pacing by the window, her nails clicking against the glass, while Bradley stood over me, wringing his hands like a nervous undertaker. I slumped in the leather armchair, my head lolling to the side, keeping up the charade of the confused geriatric. "He is agitated," Pierce said, examining my pupils with a pen light that blinded me momentarily. His voice was smooth, professional, and utterly fake. "We need to stabilize him before the notary arrives. If he is thrashing around or talking about the 1970s, the signature will not hold up in court." "Just do it," Monica snapped, turning around. "Give him the cocktail. Make him pliable." Pierce pulled a syringe from his bag. It was filled with a milky liquid. "Just a high dose of B12 and some muscle relaxants." "Conrad," he lied, his smile gleaming. "It will make you feel like you are floating on a cloud." I knew better. It was a chemical lobotomy, a mix designed to detach the will from the body, making the victim suggestible and weak. But they did not know about the 2 pills I had dry swallowed in the truck before collapsing on the driveway. Military-grade stimulants, a remnant from a life they knew nothing about, kept for emergencies exactly like this. They would keep my brain firing like a piston, even if my body turned to jelly. I did not fight as the needle pierced my arm. I let out a soft groan and then slowly let my chin drop to my chest. I relaxed every muscle in my body, forcing my breathing to slow into a deep, rhythmic rasp. I felt the cold liquid enter my veins, warring with the fire of the stimulants in my blood. My limbs felt heavy like lead, but my mind remained a razor blade in the dark. "Is he out?" Bradley whispered, hovering close to my face. Pierce lifted my eyelid. His thumb was rough. "He is in the twilight zone now. He can hear us maybe, but he cannot process it. He is a puppet. You pull the strings, he moves." "Good," Monica said, her voice dropping the facade of concern instantly. She walked over to the desk and picked up her phone. "I am confirming the meeting with the liquidators. 9 a.m. sharp." "Wait," Bradley sounded hesitant. "We are selling the whole company tomorrow, just like that." "We have to," Monica hissed. "The Russians want their money by noon. We sign the power of attorney tonight while he is drooling in this chair. Then tomorrow morning, as his legal guardians, we sign the asset purchase agreement. We strip Kingston Logistics for parts. The trucks, the warehouses, the contracts. We sell it all for pennies on the dollar." "But Dad built that company for 40 years, Bradley whimpered. "It is his legacy." "His legacy is saving your life, you idiot," Monica spat. "Do you want to keep the company, or do you want to keep your kneecaps?" "We sell it. We pay the debt. We take the leftover cash, and we leave." I listened to every word, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm of pure hatred. They were not just stealing. They were butchering my life work. They were going to fire 300 people and sell my empire for scrap just to cover a gambling debt. I lay there limp and silent, storing every word away. They thought they were speaking over a corpse. They had no idea they were confessing to the executioner. The library air was thick with greed and the metallic scent of adrenaline. Monica shoved the stack of legal documents onto the mahogany desk right in front of my face. It was the last will and testament, alongside a durable power of attorney. They were not even trying to be subtle about it anymore. They needed my wet signature to unlock the empire, and they needed it now before the drugs they thought were coursing through my veins turned me into a vegetable. "Put the pen in his hand," Monica barked at Bradley. "Stop shaking, you coward. We are 5 seconds away from owning everything." Bradley fumbled with the heavy Mont Blanc fountain pen. It was a gift I had given him when he graduated college, a symbol of responsibility he was now using to rob me. He jammed it into my limp fingers. My hand felt heavy not because of the drugs, but because of the sheer weight of the betrayal. I let my head loll back, my eyes half closed, focusing on the ceiling molding to maintain the ruse. Dad Bradley whispered, his voice trembling close to my ear. "Just sign the paper. It is for your own good. We are going to take care of you. Just sign right here." I did not move. I let my hand drop the pen, slipping from my grasp and clattering onto the desk. "For God's sake," Monica hissed. She marched around the desk, her heels digging into the rug. She grabbed my right hand with a grip that was surprisingly strong and painful. She retrieved the pen and forced it back between my fingers, crushing my knuckles until I gripped it. She drove my hand down to the signature line. "Sign it," she growled. I let out a low moan, a sound of confusion and distress. I allowed her to guide my hand, but as the nib touched the paper, I exerted just enough resistance. I made my hand spasm. I dragged the ink across the page in a jagged, violent scrawl. It looked nothing like the confident calligraphy of Conrad King. It looked like the desperate scratchings of a man under extreme duress. It was ugly. It was messy. And it was perfect. That signature was not authorization. It was evidence. Every forensic handwriting expert in the state would take one look at that shaky, coerced line and testify that it was signed under influence. It was the physical proof of elder abuse I needed to put them behind bars. "There," Monica said, snatching the document away before the ink was even dry. She held it up to the light, examining it like a diamond. "It is messy, but it is legible. It counts. We have the power of attorney." Bradley slumped into a chair, letting out a hysterical laugh. "We did it. We actually did it. The company is ours. The accounts are ours. We can pay the Russians. We are rich, Monica. We are finally rich." Monica smirked, smoothing her skirt. She looked at me slumped in the chair, apparently catatonic, and her eyes gleamed with malice. "Not just rich, Bradley. We are free. We put him in the facility tomorrow morning. Dr. Pierce has the transport arranged. By noon, he will be someone else's problem." They high-fived. Actually high-fived over the body of the father they thought they had just mentally destroyed. They poured themselves drinks from my crystal decanter, toasting their victory. I watched them through the slit of my eyelids. Go ahead and laugh, I thought, the rage burning cold and steady in my gut. Drink my scotch. Celebrate your theft. You think that piece of paper is your golden ticket. You have no idea that you just signed your own arrest warrants. That signature is not the key to my fortune. It is the key to your cell. The library door creaked open. It was not the heavy shove of my son or the sharp click of my daughter-in-law. It was a small, hesitant sound. I kept my breathing ragged, my head slumped on my chest, but I cracked my left eye open, just a fraction. Mia. She was wearing her pajamas, holding a stuffed bear I had given her 3 Christmases ago. She looked terrifyingly small in the doorway of the cavernous room. She crept toward me, her bare feet silent on the hardwood. She stopped inches from my chair. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes puffy and red. "Grandpa," she whispered, her voice trembling like a leaf in a storm. "Grandpa, please wake up. You have to wake up. They are bad, Grandpa. They are so bad." She reached out and touched my hand. Her fingers were cold. I wanted nothing more than to open my eyes, to pull her into a bear hug and tell her that Grandpa was awake, that Grandpa was actually a monster who was about to eat the bad people. But I could not. If I moved now, if I broke character, the game was over. They would call the orderlies. They would drug me for real, and Mia would be left alone with them forever. So I forced myself to remain a statue, a corpse with a beating heart. Suddenly, the hallway light flooded the room. Mia gasped and spun around. Monica stood there, silhouetted against the light like a demon. "What are you doing in here, you little brat?" Monica shrieked. Mia shrank back, pressing herself against my legs, trying to use my inert body as a shield. "I was just checking on Grandpa," she sobbed. "He is cold. Mommy, he needs a blanket. He needs to be left alone." Monica marched into the room, her face twisted in a snarl of pure, unadulterated hatred. She did not look like a mother. She looked like a warden. She grabbed Mia by the upper arm, her fingernails digging into the child's soft flesh. "Get out! Get to your room, no!" Mia screamed, trying to hold on to my pants leg. "I want to stay with Grandpa. You are hurting him. Stop it!" "Let go!" Monica roared. She yanked the child hard enough to lift her off her feet. Mia lost her grip on me and went sprawling onto the rug. Before she could scramble up, Monica loomed over her. "Stop crying," Monica hissed. She raised her hand. I saw it happening in slow motion, the manicured hand slicing through the air. The sound was sickening, a sharp, wet crack that echoed off the bookshelves. Monica slapped her own 8-year-old daughter across the face. Mia fell back, stunned into silence, holding her cheek. I stopped breathing. The rage that hit me was not cold anymore. It was molten. It was a white-hot supernova expanding in my chest. My hands, which were resting on my lap, clenched into fists so tight that I felt the skin split. My fingernails dug into my palms, piercing the flesh. I felt the warm trickle of my own blood running down my fingers, staining my trousers. Every fiber of my being screamed to leap out of that chair, to wrap my hands around Monica's throat and squeeze until the light went out of her eyes, to show her what violence actually looked like. It took every ounce of discipline I had learned in the Marine Corps, every scrap of willpower I possessed, to stay in that chair, to keep my eyes glazed, to keep my mouth slack. "Get out of my sight." Monica spat, pointing at the door. "If I see you out of your room again, I will send you to boarding school tomorrow. Do you hear me? Now go!" Mia scrambled up, sobbing uncontrollably, and ran from the room. Monica slammed the door after her and turned to look at me. She smoothed her hair, taking a deep breath, composing herself. She looked at my hand, where a drop of blood had fallen onto the leather armrest. She frowned, thinking it was just a scratch from the earlier struggle. She did not know it was the blood of a vow. "You made a mistake, Monica." I thought, staring at her through my eyelashes, my heart beating a war drum against my ribs. "You just signed your death warrant. Stealing my money was business. Trying to kill me was survival. But touching her, for that I will not just put you in prison. I will destroy you. I will make sure you suffer every single day for the rest of your miserable life. And I will enjoy watching you burn." The morning sun sliced through the heavy velvet curtains, hitting my face like a spotlight. I blinked my eyes, adjusting to the light. I was in my bed now. They must have dragged me here after I pretended to pass out in the library. My body ached from staying rigid for hours, but I forced my muscles to remain slack. I let out a low groan, a sound of a man who has finally given up. Bradley was sitting in the armchair in the corner. He jumped up, his eyes wide and bloodshot. He looked like a man who had been waiting for a bomb to go off. Monica was pacing by the door, her phone in hand. She froze when she saw me move. Dad Bradley rushed to the bedside. "You are awake. How do you feel?" I looked at him. I let my eyes drift unfocused for a moment before locking onto his face. "I feel thin, Bradley, like butter scraped over too much bread." I coughed a dry, rattling sound. I had a dream about your mother last night. She told me it is time to stop fighting. Monica stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. Time to stop fighting what, Dad? Everything I whispered, letting a single tear leak out of the corner of my eye. The business, the noise, the confusion. I cannot do it anymore. I do not know what is real and what is not. I just want to rest. Bradley exchanged a look with Monica. It was a look of pure, unadulterated relief. A look that said, we won. We can help with that, Dad, Bradley said, squeezing my hand. That is why we signed the papers. So you can rest. We will take care of everything. I know, I said, nodding slowly. But I want to do it right. I built Kingston Logistics from nothing. I do not want to just fade away in the dark like a candle being snuffed out. I want to hand it to you properly. What do you mean? Monica asked, suspicion warring with greed in her voice. A ceremony? I said, my voice gaining a little strength, a final burst of pride from a dying king. Tonight, at the Grand Hotel. I want the partners there. I want the press. I want to stand on a stage and announce that my son is taking over. I want to see you hold the scepter before I go away to the facility. Tonight, Bradley stammered. That is very soon, Dad. Can we even organize that fast? The hotel is booked months in advance. It has to be tonight, I insisted, gripping his hand with a sudden, desperate strength. If I wait, I might forget again. I feel the fog coming back, Bradley. Please, let me have this one last moment of dignity. Let me say goodbye to my empire before I lose my mind completely. Monica's eyes lit up. I could see the gears turning. It was the perfect cover. A public handover. It would legitimize everything. It would stop the rumors about my disappearance. And most importantly, it would satisfy the Russians to see Bradley publicly crowned king of the logistics world. It would buy him time. We can do it. Monica said, a smile spreading across her face that looked like a wound. I will call the events manager. I will threaten to pull our corporate account if they do not clear the ballroom. We will make the calls. It will be a celebration of your legacy, Dad. Good, I whispered, closing my eyes again and sinking back into the pillows. Go, make the arrangements. I just need to sleep until then. Do not wake me until it is time to leave. They practically ran out of the room. I heard them in the hallway, their voices high and excited. We did it, Bradley. He is handing it to us. Call the board. Call the bank. We are going to be billionaires by midnight. I lay there in the silence, listening to them plan their victory party. They were so happy, so eager. They were inviting the whole world to watch their triumph. They had no idea they were sending out invitations to their own execution. I waited until the sound of their excited footsteps faded down the hallway. I waited another 10 minutes just to be sure, listening to the silence of the house that felt more like a tomb than a home. Then I sat up. The feebleness vanished. My movements were sharp and precise. I reached into the pillowcase where I had stashed the burner phone Russo had given me before I returned to the estate. I keyed in a message to Whitman. It was short. It was simple. And it was the fuse that would blow this entire charade sky high. Execute the guest list. Tonight, the Grand Hotel, 8 p.m. The reply came back instantly. Done. The courier is already en route. I lay back against the pillows, a cold smile touching my lips. Bradley and Monica were busy inviting the press, the board members, and the high society sycophants they wanted to impress. They were curating a gallery of witnesses for their triumph. But I was curating a gallery of executioners. Whitman was sending out 2 very special hand-delivered invitations. The first was going to a warehouse in the meatpacking district addressed to a Mr. Sergei Petrov. It was a simple, heavy card embossed with the Kingston Logistics logo. Inside it read, "Your payment is ready. Mr. Bradley King requests your presence to settle all outstanding debts. Grand Hotel Ballroom, 8 p.m. VIP Table 1. Bradley thought he had bought time with the Russians. He thought he could sell the company tomorrow and pay them next week. He had no idea I was inviting the wolves right to his dinner table. When Sergei walked through those doors, Bradley would not see a guest. He would see his own death warrant staring him in the face. He would sweat. He would panic. And everyone in that room would see his fear. The second invitation was going to a manicured suburban home in the hills. To Mrs. Elena Pierce, the devoted wife of the good doctor, a woman who believed her husband was working late shifts at the hospital saving lives. Her invitation was different. It contained a single printed photo from Russo surveillance file, a picture of her husband kissing Monica in his car. The text beneath was brutal. He is not working. He is building a future with her. Come see them celebrate it tonight. Grand Hotel, 8 p.m. Monica thought she was clever. She thought she could steal my fortune, divorce my son, and run off with her lover into the sunset. She forgot that secrets are like landmines. Step on one and you do not just hurt yourself, you destroy everything around you. Mrs. Pierce was not a woman to be trifled with. She came from old money, and she had a temper that was legendary in the country club circuit. When she saw Monica standing next to her husband on that stage, she would not stay quiet. She would scream. I closed my eyes, visualizing the scene. The collision of these worlds. The criminal underground meeting the high society veneer. The betrayed wife meeting the ambitious mistress. It was going to be chaos. Beautiful, absolute chaos. I checked the time. 6 hours until the curtain rose. I needed to rest. I needed to gather my strength. Tonight I had to play the part of the fading patriarch one last time. I had to walk onto that stage frail and trembling and deliver the performance of my life. But inside I would be laughing, because while they were setting the table for a feast, I had just invited the monsters to dinner. The house was quiet, but the silence was electric, vibrating with the tension of the coming storm. I lay on the bed fully dressed in my tuxedo, my eyes closed, but my ears straining against the silence. It was 7 in the evening, 1 hour before the curtain rose at the Grand Hotel. Down the hall I heard the distinct beep, beep, beep of the keypad on my office wall safe. Monica. She had waited until the last possible minute. She needed the corporate seal. That heavy brass stamp was the scepter of my kingdom. Without it, the transfer documents she planned to execute tomorrow would be just fancy paper. The lawyers would demand the seal to validate the asset liquidation. She must have bullied the code out of Bradley, or perhaps she had just guessed it. It did not matter. I had not changed the combination because I wanted her to open it. I imagined the scene perfectly. The heavy steel door swinging open on its well-oiled hinges, the greedy anticipation lighting up her face. She would reach into the velvet-lined interior expecting to feel the cold metal of the seal and the thick stacks of emergency cash I always kept there. Instead, her hand would grasp nothing but air. I had cleaned it out 3 nights ago during my escape. The seal, the cash, the bonds, all gone. I had left only one thing behind, a single white index card placed precisely in the center of the shelf. On it, I had written a message in my boldest, steadiest script. No tremors, no shakiness, just the handwriting of a man in total command. Better luck next time, sweetheart. A scream tore through the upper floor of the mansion. It was not a scream of fear. It was a primal shriek of pure, unadulterated rage. It sounded like a banshee realizing its prey had slipped the trap. No. I heard the sound of something heavy being thrown against the wall, then the staccato rhythm of high heels pounding down the hallway. She was running. She was coming for me. My bedroom door flew open, hitting the stopper with a violence that cracked the plaster. Monica stood in the doorway, chest heaving, her face twisted into a mask of fury that ruined her expensive makeup. She held the index card in her hand, crumpling it like trash. You old bastard, she hissed, stalking toward the bed. She did not look like a socialite anymore. She looked like a cornered animal. You are faking. I know you are faking. I kept my head lolled to the side, my mouth slightly open. I blinked slowly, forcing my eyes to look past her at the wall. Catherine. I mumbled, my voice thick and slurred. Is that you, Catherine? You look angry. Stop it, Monica screamed. She grabbed the lapels of my tuxedo jacket and hauled me up, shaking me. Look at this card. Look at this handwriting. A senile old man does not write like this. Where is the seal? Where is the money? I let my head bobble like a doll. I do not understand. Is it my birthday card? Did Mia make me a card? Monica froze. She stared into my eyes, searching for a spark of intelligence, a glimmer of the man she feared. I gave her nothing but the empty, vacuous stare of dementia. Uncertainty flickered in her gaze. Was I playing her? Or had she just found an old note I had written years ago? The doubt was eating her alive, but the greed was stronger. She needed me on that stage. She needed the public spectacle to legitimize the theft. If she called it off now, the Russians would come for Bradley, and the game would be over. She shoved me back onto the pillows. I do not care, she whispered, leaning down until her nose was an inch from mine. I do not care if you are crazy or if you are the devil himself. You are going to that hotel. You are going to smile, and you are going to hand over the company. She straightened up, smoothing her dress, her eyes cold and dead. Because if you pull a stunt, Conrad, if you say one word off script, I will make sure Mia spends the rest of her childhood in a state orphanage. I will erase her from this family. Do you understand me? I nodded weakly, letting a tear of feigned terror slide down my cheek. Yes. Yes, I understand. Good. Get up. The car is waiting. She turned and marched out of the room. I wiped the tear away. She thought she had broken me with that threat. She had no idea she had just poured gasoline on the fire. You want the seal, Monica, I thought, standing up and adjusting my cufflinks. You will get it. But it is going to leave a mark you will never scrub off. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the dressing room, adjusting my silk bow tie. My hands were steady. The reflection stared back at me not as a victim, but as a soldier putting on his armor. The heavy oak door behind me clicked shut, and the lock turned. I did not need to turn around to know who it was. The scent of her expansive perfume was now tinged with the metallic, sharp smell of fear. I turned slowly. Monica was standing there. She was not empty-handed. In her right hand she gripped a silver paring knife she must have swiped from the fruit bowl on the nightstand. It was a small blade, but sharp enough to open a vein. Her hand was shaking, but her eyes were dead. "Stop the act, Conrad," she hissed. Stepping closer, the blade pointed at my chest. "I know you moved the seal. I know you moved the cash. Tell me where they are, right now, or you will not make it to the stage. I will tell them you fell. I will tell them it was an accident." She lunged. It was a clumsy, desperate thrust born of panic, not skill. She expected me to cower. She expected the frail old man she had tormented for years to beg for his life. She got the Marine. I did not flinch. I stepped inside her guard, moving with a speed that defied my 72 years. My left hand shot out, clamping around her wrist like a steel vise. I squeezed. Her eyes went wide with shock, the color draining from her face as she realized the strength in my grip was not that of a dying man. I twisted her arm up and behind her back, forcing her body to bend. The knife clattered to the floor with a harmless ping. I kicked it away. I did not let go. I pulled her close until her ear was inches from my lips. I dropped the tremulous old man voice entirely. My voice was low, steady, and cold as the grave. "Do you think because I am old, I am stupid, Monica?" She gasped, trying to struggle, but I held her fast. "You played your hand," I whispered. "You threatened my granddaughter. You tried to poison me. You thought you were the predator in this house. You have no idea what you are dealing with." I shoved her forward. She stumbled, crashing into the racks of designer suits. Before she could regain her balance, I stepped out of the dressing room and pulled the heavy door shut. I turned the key in the lock. "Let me out," she screamed, pounding on the wood. "You cannot do this. The guests are waiting." I leaned against the door, adjusting my cufflinks. "Scream all you want," I said through the wood. "No one can hear you over the music downstairs. You wanted a show, Monica. You will get one. But you are going to miss the opening act." I pocketed the key. "Tonight, you lose everything," I whispered to the door. I walked out of the bedroom, leaving my daughter-in-law trapped in the dark with nothing but her greed and a silver knife to keep her company. The king was returning to his throne, and the queen was already in checkmate. The Grand Hotel ballroom was a galaxy of crystal chandeliers and forced laughter. Waiters in white gloves moved like ghosts through the crowd, offering champagne and canapés to the city elite. It should have been the greatest night of Bradley King life. He was about to be crowned the new emperor of logistics. But as he stood by the ice sculpture of a swan, he was sweating through his silk shirt. His eyes were not on the investors or the beautiful women. They were locked on the main entrance. The crowd parted. They did not move out of politeness. They moved out of instinctual fear. Two men walked into the room like wolves entering a sheep pen. They wore suits that cost money but did not fit quite right, the fabric straining across shoulders, built for violence. Sergei and Ivan. The nightmare had arrived. Bradley dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor, a tiny explosion of crystal and expensive scotch. He turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. The walls were lined with business partners and reporters. Before he could take a step, Sergei was there. The Russian smelled of stale tobacco and cold rain. He wrapped an arm around Bradley's shoulders. To the room, it looked like an old friend greeting him. To Bradley, it felt like a python constricting its prey. "You look nervous," little King Sergei whispered, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in Bradley's chest. "You sent invitation. We are here. Where is our money?" Bradley tried to speak, but his throat was dry as sand. He forced a smile for the photographer flashing a picture nearby. "It is coming," he stammered, his voice barely audible over the jazz band. "My father. He is backstage. He is going to make the announcement in 1 hour." Sergei tightened his grip. His fingers dug into the soft flesh of Bradley's arm, bruising the muscle. "We do not want announcement. We want cash. 5 million, tonight. Or we take you outside and we break every bone in your hands." "I will get you more." Bradley hissed, desperate tears stinging his eyes. "I will get you double. Listen to me, Sergei. The company is worth 45 million. As soon as he signs the deed of transfer on that stage, I control the liquid assets. I can wire you $10 million by midnight. 10 million. Just give me 1 hour." Sergei looked at Ivan. They exchanged a silent look, a communication of predators assessing the risk. Sergei looked back at Bradley, his eyes black and empty. 10 million. Sergei repeated slowly, tasting the number. "Yes. 10 million. Just let me do the speech. Let me get the signature. Please." Sergei smiled. It was a terrifying expression that did not reach his eyes. "Okay, little king. We wait. But we do not wait at the bar. We wait with you. We are your new best friends. We go where you go. If you go to bathroom, we go. If you go to stage, we go to front row. And if the old man does not sign, if there is no money by midnight." He did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. He patted Bradley on the cheek, a gesture that looked affectionate, but felt like a slap. Bradley nodded, swallowing the bile rising in his throat. He looked around the glittering room. He was trapped. On one side, he had a father he was about to betray. On the other, he had the monsters he had invited into his life. He took a fresh glass of champagne from a passing tray and downed it in one gulp. 1 hour. He just needed to survive 1 hour. Then the old man would sign and the nightmare would be over. He had no idea the nightmare was just beginning. I left the sound of Monica screaming behind the heavy oak door and moved toward the service elevator. I knew exactly where they had put her. Monica had mentioned a quiet room on the top floor, away from the noise of the party, a place where a crying child would not embarrass the brand. They treated my granddaughter like a defective product that needed to be stored away in a warehouse until it was convenient to bring her out. I bypassed the main corridor, avoiding the staff and the early guests. I moved with a purpose that defied my age. The cane I had been using as a prop for the last 6 months was gone. I walked tall, my strides long and silent. I reached the heavy steel door of the storage suite at the end of the hallway. I pressed my ear against the cold metal. I heard it, a soft rhythmic sobbing. It was a sound that tore through the armor I had built around my heart. It was the sound of pure loneliness. I did not bother looking for a key. I stepped back, measuring the distance. I channeled 40 years of rage and slammed the heel of my dress shoe into the lock mechanism. The wood frame splintered with a loud crack, and the door swung open. The room was dark, filled with stacks of old chairs and banquet tables. In the center, sitting on a dusty dropcloth, was Mia. She looked up, her eyes wide with terror shielding her face as if she expected another slap. When she saw it was me, she froze. "Grandpa," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You are walking." I crossed the room in 2 strides and scooped her up into my arms. She felt so light, so fragile. She buried her face in my tuxedo jacket, her tears soaking into the silk. I held her tight, shielding her from the darkness, shielding her from the parents who had failed her. "I am here, sweet pea," I whispered, stroking her hair. "Grandpa is here, and I am never going to let anyone hurt you again." "But Mommy said you were sick," Mia sobbed, clinging to me. "She said you were going away." "Mommy was wrong," I said, my voice hardening. "Mommy made a mistake. I am not going anywhere. But we are going to see a show." I carried her out of the room, down the service elevator that bypassed the ballroom and opened directly into the backstage wings. The sound of the orchestra was loud here, a swelling crescendo of strings and brass. Through the heavy velvet curtains, I could see the bright lights of the stage. Standing in the shadows was Russo. He looked out of place in his leather jacket among the stagehands in black, but he looked solid. He looked like a wall that nothing could break. He nodded as I approached. "Is this the package?" Russo asked, his voice low. "This is my life," I corrected him, handing Mia gently over to the detective. "I want her in the van. Windows tinted, doors locked. Do not take your eyes off her, Russo. If anyone comes near her, anyone at all, you put them down." Mia looked at me, panic returning to her eyes. "Grandpa, where are you going? Come with us." I reached out and brushed a stray curl from her forehead. "I have to go out there for just a minute, Mia. I have to say goodbye to some people. And then I have to light a fuse." "A fuse?" she asked, sniffing. "Yes." I smiled, a sad, gentle smile that was just for her. "We are going to watch fireworks tonight, baby. The biggest fireworks you have ever seen. Now go with Mr. Russo. He is a friend. I will be right behind you." I watched Russo carry her away toward the loading dock exit. I waited until the heavy metal door clicked shut, securing the only thing in the world that mattered. Then I turned back to the curtain. I could hear the murmur of the crowd, the clinking of glasses, the anticipation. I adjusted my tie. The father was gone. The grandfather was gone. Now only the executioner remained. I stepped toward the light, ready to burn it all down. The spotlight blinded me for a second, a white wall of heat that smelled of ozone and expectation. The applause rolled over me like a physical wave, a thunderous approval from 500 people who had come to witness a funeral disguised as a coronation. I walked to the center of the podium, my hand resting lightly on the polished wood. I looked out into the sea of faces. I saw the senators, the bankers, the competitors who had spent decades trying to bury me. They were all smiling, all clapping, waiting for the old lion to finally lie down and die. To my right stood my son. Bradley was vibrating. It was not excitement. It was the frequency of a man about to shatter. Sweat beaded on his upper lip, glistening under the harsh stage lights. His eyes kept darting to the front row, specifically to the VIP table where Sergei sat. The Russian raised a glass of champagne in a mock toast, a silent reminder that the clock was ticking. Bradley smiled back, a grimace that looked more like a rictus of pain. He was drowning in plain sight, and nobody saw the water but me. Then came the sound of frantic heels clacking against the stage floor. Monica appeared from the side wing. She had managed to escape the dressing room, likely kicking through a panel or bribing a maid, but the effort had cost her. Her hair, usually lacquered into a helmet of perfection, was loose on one side. Her dress was rumpled, and there was a frantic, wild look in her eyes that she was struggling to hide behind a mask of composure. She rushed to my left side, hooking her arm through mine. To the audience, it looked like a gesture of filial support. To me, it felt like a shackle. She leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. "You think you are clever," she whispered, her voice a venomous hiss masked by a bright plastic smile. "You think locking me in a closet changes anything. Stick to the script, old man. Sign the papers, or I swear I will burn this legacy to the ground." I looked at her. I looked at the fear behind her rage. She did not know Mia was gone. She did not know the money was gone. She was playing a game that had ended an hour ago. I patted her hand gently, the picture of a loving father-in-law. "You look tired, Monica," I said loud enough for the microphone to catch a faint murmur. "You should really relax. It is going to be a long night." The room went quiet. The applause died down, replaced by an expectant hush. They wanted a speech. They wanted the torch to be passed. Bradley wiped his forehead with a shaking hand and stepped toward the microphone, trying to salvage the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," he croaked, his voice cracking. "My father, Conrad King." I stepped forward. I did not need the cane. I did not need the notes. I looked at the camera lenses that stared back at me like unblinking eyes. I saw the greed in my son's face. I saw the hate in Monica's eyes. And I saw the confused terror in the eyes of the board members who were starting to realize that the lion they thought was toothless had just walked into the room without a leash. The air in the ballroom was heavy with the scent of expensive perfume and impending disaster. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold clarity of revenge. It was time. The feedback from the microphone whined for a split second, a high-pitched screech that cut through the silence of the ballroom like a knife. I gripped the stand, my knuckles pale under the harsh stage lights. To the 500 people watching, I looked like a man steadying himself against the weight of his age. In reality, I was anchoring myself against the recoil of the weapon I was about to fire. I looked down at the sea of faces. I saw the hungry eyes of the investors. I saw the bored expressions of the politicians. And right in the front row, I saw Sergei. He was not drinking his champagne. He was leaning forward, his elbows on the table, his eyes locked on my son. He was a shark smelling blood in the water, waiting for the feeding frenzy to begin. I turned my head slightly to look at Bradley. He was vibrating with a manic energy that was painful to watch. He was practically bouncing on the balls of his feet, his hands wringing together. He looked at me with a desperate, pleading intensity. "Say it," his eyes screamed. "Just say the words and save my life." I leaned into the microphone. My voice boomed through the speakers, deep and resonant, the voice that had commanded union halls and boardrooms for 4 decades. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "thank you all for coming tonight. We are gathered here to celebrate the future of Kingston Logistics. But to understand the future, you must understand the past, Omons. I built this company with nothing but grit and a refusal to quit. I sacrificed my youth. I sacrificed my time. I sacrificed more than any of you will ever know to build this empire. I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. I saw Monica stiffen beside me, her fake smile faltering for a fraction of a second. She sensed the shift in the air. She sensed that the script was drifting, but she could not stop it now. Not with the cameras rolling. But a man cannot rule forever. I continued, my voice softening, dropping to a register of apparent vulnerability. There comes a time when the king must lay down his sword. There comes a time when the legacy must be passed to the next generation, to the blood, to the family. A collective sigh went through the room. This was it, the moment they had all come for. The surrender. I reached into the inner pocket of my tuxedo jacket. I did so slowly, deliberately dragging out the moment. Bradley's eyes widened. He stopped breathing. He saw the blue leather folio emerging from my pocket. It was the document holder that contained the transfer of power, the keys to the kingdom, the $45 million lifeline that would keep the Russians from breaking his legs. Tonight, I said, pulling the folio free, I am formally announcing the restructuring of the Kingston estate. I am announcing the final disposition of my assets and the naming of my successor. Bradley could not help himself. He took a step forward. He did not look like a CEO. He looked like a starving dog. He reached out his hand, his palm open, and sweating, his fingers trembling with greed and relief. He was not just reaching for a company. He was reaching for salvation. Give it to me, he whispered, his lips barely moving. Give it to me, Dad. I looked at his outstretched hand. I looked at the folio in my grip. I looked at the Russians waiting in the front row. And for a brief, fleeting second, I felt a pang of sadness. Not for the man standing next to me, but for the little boy he used to be. The boy who used to wait for me on the porch steps. That boy was dead. Killed by greed. Killed by weakness. And the man standing in front of me was a stranger who had tried to bury me alive. I smiled at him. It was a gentle smile, the kind a father gives a son before teaching him a hard lesson. You are ready for this, aren't you, son? I asked into the microphone. I was born ready, Bradley said, loud enough for the room to hear his confidence surging back. Then take it, I said. But remember, Bradley, be careful what you wish for, because once you take this, there is no giving it back. Bradley reached for the leather folio, his fingers twitching with anticipation. But I did not let go. Instead, I reached into my other pocket and pulled out a small black remote control. I looked him dead in the eye, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. I told you to look at the past, son. Let us look at it together. I pressed the button. The massive LED screen behind us, usually reserved for quarterly graphs and inspirational quotes, flickered to life. It was not a spreadsheet. It was a movie. The image was grainy, taken from the hidden camera inside the master bedroom ceiling fan, but the audio was crystal clear. It boomed through the ballroom speakers, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. There was Monica sitting on the edge of the bed, wearing nothing but a silk robe. Beside her was Dr. Pierce. They were toasting with my vintage wine. The dialogue cut through the room like a guillotine. He will be dead in a week, Pierce's voice said, lazy and arrogant. The cocktail destroys the neural pathways. It looks exactly like Alzheimer. No autopsy will catch it. Then Monica's voice, shrill and greedy. Good. I cannot wait another day. I want him gone. I want the money. I want to burn this house down and leave. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. It sounded like 500 people had been punched in the gut simultaneously. Monica let out a strangled cry, reaching out, as if she could physically grab the words from the air, but the video cut. Now it was Bradley. He was sitting at his desk, head in his hands, sobbing into a phone. I cooked the books, he wailed on the screen. I falsified the quarterly reports to hide the losses. I stole from the pension fund to pay the crypto exchange. If my father finds out, he will disown me. I have to declare him incompetent. It is the only way to cover the theft. The screen went black. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. The kind of silence that follows a car crash before the screaming starts. Then the room exploded. Bradley stood frozen, his hand still outstretched, but now shaking so violently it looked like he was having a seizure. He looked at the screen, then at the crowd, then at me. His face was gray. The mask had not just slipped, it had been ripped off, taking the skin with it. Monica tried to run. She turned toward the wings, but the exit was blocked by the sheer weight of the accusation hanging in the air. Suddenly, a movement in the front row caught everyone's eye. Mrs. Elena Pierce, a woman known for her charity luncheons and impeccable manners, stood up. She did not look at the screen. She looked at her husband, who was sitting 2 tables away, trying to shrink into his chair. She moved with the speed of a heat-seeking missile. She reached him before he could stand. The sound of the slap was louder than the microphone feedback. It was a crack that signaled the end of a marriage and a career. She started screaming, clawing at his face, tearing at his expensive suit, while the waiters stood back too terrified to intervene. I stood at the podium watching the chaos unfold. The flashes of the cameras were blinding now, a strobe light on the destruction of my family. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I just watched. They wanted a show. They wanted a memorable night. I had given them the truth, and it was tearing them apart. I waited for the shock of the video to settle into a heavy, suffocating silence. The ballroom was frozen. The waiters had stopped serving. The band had stopped playing. All eyes were pinned to the stage where a tragedy was playing out in real time. I looked at my son. He was trembling so violently that his teeth were actually chattering. He looked like a man standing on the gallows, waiting for the trapdoor to drop, but he was still desperate enough to hope the rope might break. I tapped the microphone once. The sound was a sharp crack that made everyone jump. "Silence," I commanded. My voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The murmurs died instantly. I turned my body fully toward Bradley. I held up the blue leather folio, the document that represented the crown jewels of my empire. "You came here tonight for a legacy." I said, my voice calm and conversational. "You lied for it. You stole for it. You betrayed your own blood for it. You were willing to put your father in a cage and your daughter in an orphanage just to get your hands on this paper." Bradley stared at the folio. His eyes were wide, filled with a terrifying mixture of shame and hunger. He glanced at the front table where Sergei was cracking his knuckles slowly, deliberately. Bradley knew he had minutes, not hours. "So take it," I said, thrusting the folio into his chest. Bradley reacted on instinct. He grabbed the folder, clutching it to his heart like a life preserver in a storm. He didn't care about the video. He didn't care about the scandal. He only cared that he held the deed. "It is mine," he gasped, looking at the crowd, a manic grin stretching his face. "It is mine. I am the CEO. I control the assets." He looked at Sergei. "I have it," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I have the company. I can pay you." I let him have his moment. I let him feel the warmth of victory for exactly 5 seconds. Then I leaned back into the microphone. "Congratulations, Bradley," I said. "You are now the sole owner and CEO of Kingston Logistics. You own the name. You own the brand." I paused, letting a cold smile touch my lips. However, there is a small administrative detail I should mention. At 9:00 this morning, acting as the sole proprietor, I executed a complete asset divestiture. Every truck, every warehouse, every piece of intellectual property. It was all sold. The proceeds have been moved into an irrevocable blind trust for Mia. Bradley's smile faltered. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like gray ash. What? What are you saying? I am saying that the entity you just claimed ownership of is a shell. I continued, my voice slicing through the room. It has zero assets. It has zero revenue. It is a ghost ship, Bradley. But that is not the best part. I took a step closer to him, pointing a finger at his chest. Because the company has no assets. The bankruptcy protection I filed at noon does not cover the liabilities. Specifically the $10 million in unpaid payroll taxes that you tried to hide with your creative accounting. Since you just accepted full executive control in front of 500 witnesses and a live camera feed, that debt is now yours. The room gasped. You do not have $45 million, son. I whispered the microphone, picking up every syllable. You have nothing. You have a bankrupt company, a $10 million tax bill, and absolutely no way to pay it. You are not just broke, you are legally, financially, and morally destitute. I looked down at Sergei. The Russian stood up, slowly buttoning his suit jacket. He did not look angry. He looked disappointed. He looked at Bradley the way a butcher looks at a piece of meat. Bradley dropped the folio. It hit the stage with a flat, hollow sound. He looked at me, his eyes filling with a horror that went beyond words. He realized finally that he hadn't just lost the game. He had been playing the wrong game entirely. Bradley looked like a man who had been shot but refused to fall down. He was swaying on his feet, his hands clutching the empty air where his fortune used to be. But greed is a powerful drug, and even in the face of ruin, he found one last desperate hope. He licked his dry lips, his eyes darting back and forth. But the personal accounts, he stammered, his voice rising to a shriek. The offshore holdings, the liquid cash. You are worth millions, Dad. Even without the company, you have the private fortune. We have the power of attorney. We control your personal assets. Monica grabbed his arm, her nails digging in. Yes, the Swiss accounts, the Cayman bonds. You cannot hide those. We know they exist. I reached into the breast pocket of my tuxedo one last time. The room went deadly silent again. They were expecting another weapon, another piece of evidence. Instead, I pulled out a single piece of paper. It was not a legal document. It was a blown-up photocopy of a cashier check. I held it up to the light so the cameras could catch the row of zeros. You are right, I said, my voice calm and steady. I was worth millions, past tense. I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at them like a judge passing sentence. You were so busy plotting to steal my company that you forgot to check the market. Last week, while you were meeting with your divorce lawyers, I was meeting with a private equity firm in Singapore. I sold my entire personal stake, every share, every bond, every option. Sold it, Bradley whispered, his knees buckling. Liquidated, I corrected him. For cash. $45 million. Where is it? Monica screamed, lunging forward only to be restrained by a security guard. Where is the money, old man? I pointed to the screen behind me. The video feed changed one last time. It showed a bank statement. The beneficiary name was printed in bold letters at the top. The Mia King Irrevocable Trust. I deposited the full amount this morning, I announced. $45 million. And here's the kicker. I set the terms myself. The trust is locked, ironclad, bulletproof. No one touches a dime of that principal until Mia turns 25 years old. Not her parents, not the banks, and certainly not her grandfather. I turned to look at the board members sitting in the front row. I have appointed myself as the sole trustee, I said, but the contract is specific. I serve as an unpaid guardian. I cannot withdraw money for myself. I cannot use it for expenses. I have effectively made myself a pauper to protect that little girl future. I have nothing left for you to steal, Bradley. No company, no fortune, no leverage. Bradley fell to his knees. It was not a theatrical gesture. His legs simply gave out. He stared at the floor, his mind trying to comprehend the magnitude of the loss. The $10 million debt to the Russians was real. The assets to pay it were gone. The inheritance was a mirage. "You killed us," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You actually killed us." "No, son," I said, leaning down to look him in the eye. "You killed yourself. I just made sure you did not take Mia with you. The money belongs to her. It always did. And now it is safe from the two people who would have spent it on gambling and vanity. You wanted the gold, Bradley. Well, it is in a vault that will not open for 17 years. Good luck waiting that long." The doors to the ballroom burst open with a violence that silenced the room instantly. It was not the staff this time. It was a phalanx of uniformed officers led by a detective whose face was as hard as stone. The red and blue strobe of the police cruisers outside cut through the elegant windows, painting the guests in harsh, chaotic light. Whitman had timed it perfectly. The legal hammer was falling right alongside the financial axe. Monica froze. She was halfway to the exit, her heels clicking rapidly on the marble, but she stopped dead as the officers fanned out, blocking every escape route. She looked back at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and terror. She realized in that moment that I had not just taken her money. I had taken her freedom. "Monica King." The detective barked, his voice booming across the silent hall. "Step away from the crowd and put your hands where I can see them." "I am not doing anything," Monica shrieked, her voice shrill and desperate. "This is a mistake. My father-in-law is senile. He is confused. He made all of this up." The detective did not blink. He marched up to her, pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. "We are not here for the fraud, Mrs. King. We are here for the assault. We have video evidence of you striking a minor. We have witness testimony regarding unlawful imprisonment. And we have the toxicology report from a glass of wine found in your master bedroom containing lethal amounts of cyanide." The crowd gasped. The word cyanide hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Monica's face drained of all color. She looked at Bradley, who was still on his knees staring at the floor. "Help me," she screamed, kicking at him. "Tell them, Bradley. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." Bradley did not move. He was a statue of defeat. The detective grabbed Monica's wrist, spinning her around. She fought him. She clawed and kicked, losing all semblance of the high society dignity she prized so much. She was a wild animal caught in a snare. The metal cuffs clicked shut with a sound that was final and satisfying. "You old devil," she screamed, twisting her head to look at me as they dragged her toward the exit. "I hope you rot. I hope you die alone in that big house. You planned this. You set us up." I stood at the podium watching her struggle. I did not feel joy. I did not feel triumph. I felt a grim satisfaction, the kind a surgeon feels after cutting out a tumor. I leaned into the microphone one last time, my voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. "I will not die alone, Monica," I said, looking her in the eye as the officers shoved her through the doors. "Because I have the one thing you never understood. I have the truth. And unlike you, I never raised a hand against a child. Enjoy prison. I hear the food is terrible." Her screams faded down the hallway, replaced by the murmur of a crowd that had just witnessed the most brutal dismantling of a family in Seattle history. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. The war was over. The Queen was captured. The bishop was broken. And the king was still standing. The police turned their attention to the man standing alone on the stage. Bradley looked small. Without the arrogance, without the company, and without the wife who had fueled his worst impulses, he was just a frightened child in a suit that no longer fit the occasion. The detective stepped forward, pulling a second pair of handcuffs from his belt, but before he could reach my son, a movement in the front row stopped him. Sergei stood up. The Russian mobster did not run. He did not hide from the police. He simply adjusted his tie and looked directly at Bradley. He raised two fingers to his eyes and then pointed them at my son. It was a silent, universal gesture. We are watching. We are waiting. Then he ran a thumb across his throat. Bradley saw it. He understood instantly what it meant. The police were taking him to a holding cell, but the long arm of the Petrov organization reached through bars and concrete walls. A prison sentence for tax fraud was survivable. A $10 million debt to the Russian mafia inside a federal penitentiary was a death sentence. Bradley fell to his knees. The sound of his expensive trousers hitting the stage floor echoed in the sudden silence. He scrambled toward me, crawling on his hands and knees, ignoring the police officers who were closing in. He grabbed the hem of my tuxedo jacket, his fingers digging into the fabric. "Dad!" he screamed, and it was a sound that made the remaining guests turn away in discomfort. "Dad, please. You have to help me. You saw him. You saw Sergei. They are going to kill me. They will get to me in jail. I will not last a week." He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat and the snot. He looked pathetic. He looked terrified. "Pay them, Dad," he begged. "Just pay the debt. You have the money. The trust fund. Break it. Unfreeze it. Please. I am your son. You cannot let them slaughter me." I looked down at the hand clutching my jacket. It was the hand of a man who had never worked a day in his life without a safety net. A man who thought consequences were things that happened to other people. I felt a deep, heavy sadness settle in my chest. It was not anger anymore. It was the crushing weight of failure. Not his failure. Mine. I reached down and gently peeled his fingers off my jacket one by one. I held his hand for a second, feeling the tremors running through his body. "I cannot help you, Bradley," I said, my voice soft, but carrying the weight of a final judgment. "You can," he sobbed. "You have $45 million. That money belongs to Mia," I said, dropping his hand. "It belongs to the innocent. You chose this path. You borrowed the money. You made the deal. You signed the papers." "But I am your son," he wailed. "Yes," I said, looking him deep in the eyes, seeing the reflection of my own ambition twisted into something ugly. "You are my son, and that is my fault. I taught you how to read a balance sheet. I taught you how to negotiate a contract. I taught you how to win, but I forgot the most important lesson. I forgot to teach you how to be a man. I forgot to teach you that your word is your bond, and that family is not an asset to be liquidated." I stepped back, putting distance between us. "This is a lesson I cannot buy your way out of," I said. "You have to learn this one on your own." "Dad, no. Don't walk away." "Dad." I turned my back. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Behind me, I heard the click of handcuffs and the desperate screaming of a man realizing he was truly alone for the first time in his life. I did not look back. I walked toward the exit where my granddaughter was waiting. The king was dead. Long live the king. The handcuffs clicked shut around Bradley's wrists with a sound that felt like a gavel striking a block. It was a cold, mechanical finality that signaled the end of his life as he knew it. He did not fight the officers. He could not. His legs were like jelly, and his spirit had been ground into dust. The detective hauled him up, roughly pulling him away from the spot where he had begged his father for salvation. Bradley looked around the ballroom. The guests, the investors, the people he had tried so desperately to impress, were now looking at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. He was no longer the heir apparent. He was a cautionary tale. He was the man who had traded his soul for a crown that did not exist. As the officers marched him toward the exit, they had to pass the front table. Bradley tried to close his eyes, but he could not shut out the presence of Sergei. The Russian mobster remained seated, sipping his champagne with a terrifying calmness. As Bradley passed, Sergei did not say a word. He just smiled a small, knowing smile that promised a lifetime of terror. Bradley realized with a sickening lurch in his gut that the police were not just arresting him, they were saving him. For now. Inside a cell, he might survive the night. On the street, he would not have lasted an hour. But the debt would follow him. The interest would compound in blood. He was walking into a cage, but the wolves were already waiting inside. Outside, the cool night air hit him like a slap. The flashing red and blue lights of the cruisers illuminated the chaos. He was shoved into the back of a squad car, his face pressed against the cold glass. He watched the Grand Hotel disappear in the distance, a glowing palace of dreams that had turned into his personal hell. He began to weep silently, mourning the death of the man he thought he was. Miles away, another tragedy was reaching its conclusion. At the King estate, the lights were being extinguished one by one. The mansion that had stood as a monument to wealth and power was now a crime scene. A fleet of unmarked cars sat in the driveway, the gravel crunching under the boots of federal agents. They moved through the house with clinical efficiency. The yellow tape marked police line "Do Not Cross" was stretched across the massive oak front doors. It was a ribbon of shame wrapping around the legacy Conrad had built. Agents were cataloging everything. The expensive art on the walls that Monica had bought with stolen money. The crystal vases. The furniture. It was all evidence now. It was all forfeit. A senior agent walked through the library where the fake will had been signed. He picked up the Mont Blanc pen from the floor, placing it into a plastic evidence bag. The room smelled of stale scotch and betrayal. He checked the safe, finding it empty just as the report had said. Outside, the main gate was closed and locked with a heavy padlock. A notice of seizure was pasted onto the stone pillar. The property was now under the control of the state, pending the investigation into the fraud and the attempted murder. The windows were dark. The grand silhouette of the house loomed against the night sky like a tombstone. There was no life left inside. No parties. No arguments. No crying little girl in the attic. The silence was absolute. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a kingdom that had fallen not by war, but by the rot from within. The King family dynasty was over, leaving nothing behind but an empty shell and a warning to anyone foolish enough to think that greed comes without a price. The heavy brass doors of the Grand Hotel swung shut behind us, cutting off the cacophony of the ballroom. One minute I was standing in a storm of flashing cameras and screaming accusations, and the next I was standing in the cool silence of the Seattle night. The air was crisp and smelled of rain and exhaust, but to me it smelled sweeter than any vintage wine I had ever tasted. It smelled like freedom. I looked down at my hand. My fingers were intertwined with Mia's small, trusting hand. She was holding on to me as if I were the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly turned liquid. She did not look in the police cars flashing their red and blue lights against the hotel facade. She just looked at me. We walked past the line of sleek black limousines and Italian sports cars waiting for the guests who would not be leaving anytime soon. The valets looked nervous, whispering among themselves as they watched the police activity. One of them, a young kid I had tipped $100 to park my truck earlier, ran forward when he saw me. He did not look at me with the reverence usually reserved for Conrad King, the billionaire. He looked at me with confusion. He brought the battered Ford F-150 around the corner, the engine sputtering a little as it idled next to a Rolls-Royce. The truck was covered in mud. The fender was dented. It was a rust bucket compared to the shining metal surrounding it. But as I opened the passenger door and lifted Mia onto the worn bench seat, I felt a surge of affection for that old machine. It was honest. It was tough. And it was mine. I walked around to the driver's side. I paused for a moment, looking back at the hotel. Inside that building, I had left everything. My reputation, my company, my legacy. By tomorrow morning, the name King would be synonymous with scandal. The mansion on the hill would be seized. The accounts would be frozen. I was standing there in a tuxedo worth $5,000 with maybe $200 in my wallet and no home to return to. I should have felt terrified. A man of my age starting over with nothing but a child to raise. But as I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the damp night air, I realized I felt something completely different. I felt light. For 40 years, I had carried the weight of the world on my shoulders. I had worried about profit margins and stock prices. I had lost sleep over mergers and acquisitions. I had spent decades building a fortress of gold, only to realize I had locked myself in with the snakes. Now the fortress was gone. The snakes were in cages, and the weight was lifted. I climbed into the cab and shut the door. The sound was a solid, reassuring thud. The interior smelled of old leather and sawdust, not the sterile scent of the boardroom. I turned the key, and the engine roared to life, a rough, unrefined sound that felt like a heartbeat. Mia looked at me, her eyes wide in the dim light of the dashboard. "Grandpa," she whispered, "where are we going to sleep? We cannot go home." Mommy said the police took the house. I reached out and smoothed her hair. "We are not going back to that house, Mia. That was never really a home. It was just a building where people lived who didn't know how to love each other." "But are we poor now?" she asked, a tremor of fear in her voice. I looked at her. I looked at the freedom stretching out before us on the open road. I looked at the toxic legacy I had just severed to save her life. "No, sweet pea," I said, shifting the truck into gear. "We have a full tank of gas. We have each other, and for the first time in a very long time, we have the truth. We are the richest people in the world." I pulled out of the driveway, leaving the flashing lights and the ruins of my empire in the rearview mirror. I did not look back. I just drove into the night, ready to start the first day of my real life. The sun rose over the Texas plains, painting the sky in strokes of burnt orange and violent violet. It was a different sun than the one in Seattle. It was warmer, bigger, and it didn't hide behind clouds of gray rain. I stood on the porch of the small ranch house holding a mug of black coffee. The steam rose in the cool morning air, mixing with the scent of sagebrush and dry earth. This place wasn't a mansion. It was a simple 3-bedroom house with a wraparound porch and a tin roof that sang when the rain fell. I had bought it with my military pension, the small savings account I had kept hidden from everyone for 40 years. It was honest money. It bought us honest peace. There were no marble floors here to slip on, no crystal chandeliers to worry about breaking, just sturdy oak floorboards and windows that looked out onto endless miles of freedom. The screen door slammed open behind me. I didn't flinch. 6 months ago, a slamming door would have made me reach for a weapon. Now I knew what it was. "Grandpa, the bus is coming." Mia ran out onto the porch. She looked different. The pale, frightened ghost who used to haunt the attic was gone. In her place was a girl with sun-kissed skin and scraped knees from climbing the old pecan tree in the backyard. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, not the stiff, formal dresses Monica used to force her into. She had a backpack slung over one shoulder and a piece of toast in her hand. "Did you feed the chickens?" I asked, ruffling her hair. "Yes," she chirped, taking a big bite of toast. "And I collected 3 eggs. One is blue. Can we have it for supper?" "We can have whatever you want, sweet pea." I walked her down the dirt driveway to the main road. She skipped. Skipping was something she had learned to do here. She hummed a song she had learned in the local school choir. She wasn't the heiress to the Kingston fortune anymore. She was just Mia, and she was happy. I watched the yellow school bus crest the hill, its brakes squealing in the quiet morning. She climbed the steps, waving at me until the bus disappeared around the bend. I waved back until the dust settled. I walked back to the house and sat in the rocking chair. On the small wooden table beside me lay a letter from Whitman. I had read it 10 times already, but I picked it up again. The paper was crisp, the legal language sharp and final. The trial was over. The jury hadn't been swayed by the tears or the expensive suits. The video evidence was too damning. The toxicology reports were too clear. Monica King sentenced to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. The judge had been particularly harsh, citing the abuse of a minor and the cold calculation of her crimes. She would be an old woman before she ever saw the outside of a cell again. And Bradley, my son, 20 years. The financial fraud combined with the conspiracy charges had buried him. The court had thrown the book at him to make an example. He was in a maximum security facility now, far away from the debts he owed and the life he had destroyed. I didn't feel joy reading it. I felt a heavy, somber closure. They were where they belonged. They could no longer hurt us. They were just memories now fading like the morning mist. I looked out at the horizon. The $45 million was sitting in a vault in Zurich, untouchable and growing. I didn't need it. I had my pension. I had this farm. And most importantly, I had the sound of my granddaughter laughing when she came home. I took a sip of coffee. It was cheap store-brand coffee, but it tasted better than anything I had ever drunk in a boardroom. The war was over. The peace had begun. "Easy on the clutch, sweet pea," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "Ease it out slow, just like I showed you." The old Ford sputtered for a second, the engine coughing like an old man clearing his throat. But then it caught. The tires crunched over the dry Texas grass, and we were moving. Mia let out a squeal of pure delight, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2. She had to sit on 2 phone books just to see over the dashboard, but she looked more in control now than my son ever did running a multi-million-dollar corporation. We were out in the north pasture, far away from the paved roads and the rules of the world I had left behind. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, turning the sky into a bruised canvas of purple and gold. The dust kicked up by the tires turned into golden mist in the rearview mirror. "You are doing it, Grandpa!" she shouted over the rumble of the engine. "I am driving. I am really driving. Keep your eyes on the horizon." I told her, resting my arm out the open window. "Do not look at the bumps right in front of you. Look at where you want to go. The truck will follow your eyes." I watched her profile as she concentrated, biting her lip in a way that reminded me so much of her grandmother. She was safe. She was whole. The shadows under her eyes were gone. The flinch was gone. She was just a child learning to drive a beat-up truck on a Tuesday evening. I leaned back in the seat, feeling the vibration of the road through my spine. It was a rough ride, but it felt real. It felt grounded. For a long time, I believed the lies that society tells us. They tell you that family is everything. They tell you that blood is thicker than water, and that you have to stick by your kin no matter what. They tell you that loyalty means suffering in silence, while the people you love drain you dry. I believed that for 40 years. I let it blind me. I let it excuse the greed and the cruelty, because they carried my last name. But as I watched the sunset reflecting in my granddaughter's eyes, I finally understood the truth. I realized that sometimes family is not the healthy tissue that holds you together. Sometimes it is the cancer that is killing you. Sometimes the people closest to you are the necrosis, the rotting flesh that threatens to poison the whole body. And when that happens, you do not put a bandage on it. You do not pray for it to get better. You cut it off. It is a painful surgery. It leaves a scar. It bleeds. But it is the only way to save the patient. I lost a fortune to get to this seat. I lost the company I built with my bare hands. I lost the mansion on the hill. I lost the respect of the high society elites who measure a man's worth by his bank account. To them, I am a failure. I am the old tycoon who lost his mind and his money. Let them talk. Let them sit in their glass towers and count their gold. I looked at Mia laughing as she steered the truck toward the big oak tree. I looked at the peace that surrounded us, a peace that no amount of money could buy. I traded a kingdom of lies for a patch of dirt and the truth. That cost me $45 million. And sitting here right now listening to that little girl laugh, I know one thing for sure. It was the best investment I ever made. The true measure of wealth is not found in bank accounts or grand legacies, but in the peace we cultivate and the innocence we protect. Conrad's journey teaches us a painful but necessary truth that toxic loyalty is a cage we build for ourselves. We often fear losing people, even those who hurt us, because we confuse shared DNA with love. But real family is built on safety, not genetic obligation. Sometimes walking away with nothing but your dignity and the people who truly love you is not a loss, it is the ultimate victory. Peace is expensive, but it is worth every single penny. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it, and follow our channel for more tales of justice and redemption.